All right, we are back on Observe This. Brandon, Draven, and myself. This is considered season 2, right?
Yeah, I mean, yeah. It's
Season
over a
2.
month ago since we had the season finale.
Yeah, so we began last year in 2024 talking 1989. Now we are talking 1984, which is so different. Just
Yeah.
even in the beginning of the year when all hell breaks loose, it's so different from 1989. And everything is completely different from today, of course, because of what the business is today. But I thought it was a kind of an interesting experiment to do 84. I was not even 8 years old yet in 1984.
I was
Y-
4.
You were 4. And so this is not like we were watching any of this live. So everything
No.
that we know about 84 is learned and watching old school tapes and stuff, which I did a lot of. I watched a lot of the St. Louis Hogan stuff before he becomes champion. And it was fascinating to watch. You know, my main takeaway, this is even before getting into everything. My main takeaway is from a charisma perspective, 1984 Hulk Hogan still has more charisma than anybody in wrestling today. Like, just absolute
I don't know if he
insanity.
has not The Rock. Would you say more so than The Rock?
It's a different charisma. The Rock, I think The Rock's charisma, a lot of what The Rock's charisma is today is just based on pure celebrity because he's so famous.
Hmm.
If he was not famous, he would still have a ton of charisma because you think about 1998, 99 Rock, and that's before he hits big in the movies. He still has a ton of charisma, but I would put Hogan 84 from that pure babyface perspective up against anyone. And I was kind of thinking like, is this stuff going to age well? Now the sayings, where he keeps telling Mean Gene that he's getting turned on. Uh,
Well, there's a lot of that. There's a lot of that
yeah.
with Hogan. He gets very, very awkward and weird many times over.
He's turned on. He used a couple of other things basically to say that he's excited and
Hmm.
that he's just has a lot of energy. But yeah, it ages well from the perspective of like, yeah, old school baby face. He's bigger than life. He is about to take over and help Vince dominate pro wrestling here. It was fascinating to watch that stuff back.
Yeah, and of course, like any of these kind of cult heroes, they're reflective of the time, right? It's all about the time frame that they came up. You could mix and match, and not just in wrestling, just in life in general, whether it's sports heroes, movie stars. If you take them out of one time frame and put them into another, most of the time they don't fit. Of course, we have like that generational ones that fit everywhere, but like a Steve Austin would not fit in '84, and a babyface Hogan would not fit in '98.
Yes.
These kind of iconic heroes that we create as a society or we pedestal, they're a reflection of where we're at during that time. So that's why in looking at all these things in hindsight could be awkward sometimes, because now Hogan comes off as a bit cartoony, and like you said, a little awkward with what he says. But at that time, people were eating that stuff up. It was a more
Hmm.
innocent time, it was a bigger, it was closer communities and a bigger world, whereas now it's a smaller world, just because we're all so connected. And it wasn't as cynical at that time either. So yeah, I mean, he was perfect for the time.
I read a book. Gosh, this would have been actually probably last year or the year before. It's called Glory Days, the Summer of 84 and the 90 Days That Changed Sports and Culture Forever. I actually didn't read it. I listened to the audiobook, book by L. John.
Thank you for that, by the way. Thank you for that. It irritates the fuck out of me when people have just accepted that listening to an audiobook is reading. It's not
Yes,
reading.
yes. It's not reading.
Uh,
It's like listening
yeah.
to a podcast.
Yes.
Um, John L. John Wortham. Maybe if I remember, I'll put this in the show notes on the podcast feed. It was the reason why I read it is because 1984 stands out to me a lot as a kid
Could you
from
read
a
that? Could you read that? What does it say?
that
Does it,
doesn't say 1984. I wish it said 1984 on that glass. It says
n-
2024.
yes. And then I have the entire roster here. Now, I did not buy this a gift, by the way, because I don't wear or have anything that has people's names on it.
There's a question when we get to the Q&A section about our Giants and Dodgers.
Yeah, our buddy Peter H asked that. That's
Yeah.
right.
So, anyways, this book, I read it because 1984 is a giant year in pop culture and in sports, and it's kind of like one of those years where it's like magnified because of how many things happen, and you have Madonna and Michael Jackson and Prince, and then on the sports side, you have the '84 Olympics, the Summer Games in LA. You have the Lakers and the Celtics, and in the NFL, the Niners, win the Super Bowl. So like that is a very magnified year for me, but I liked revisiting that in the book. And so what does 1984 mean for WWE? It's also the most magnified, biggest kind of transitional phase in wrestling.
Yeah.
Vince McMahon trying to go national, and just the things that Dave's writing, it almost comes as like and it's sort of like an impending doom that is about to take over wrestling. And I read so you and I are reading from the '84 Wrestling Observer book that came out last year.
Right.
I went back because this isn't in the book, but it is the yearbook from 1983. I found a copy. Someone had scanned it, and I was digging through that. 1983 was a very successful year in pro wrestling. Like the houses that these companies were doing, for big shows, 20,000 people, in some instances like 25,000 people in a building for a big show. And look, WWE is doing great today, but their big Raws are 16,000, 17,000 because they got this giant stage that kind of takes up a quarter of the building. But they go into stadiums to run more than 20,000 fans in the building. But back in 1983, these companies, and there were multiple companies, not that we're able to draw that much, but there were multiple companies that were able to draw some really big houses. And so I always listened, or just the way that Vince McMahon told the history, I just assumed that the wrestling business was like dead in the early 80s. And here's Vince McMahon to save the day. And it's absolutely the opposite.
Right. Well, it's interesting because the story that he tried to tell, right? When, like they always say, winners get to tell the story, and he was the winner. So he created this narrative that before 1984, the smoky arenas, the dingy lighting, and all that stuff, and there was really nothing going on. And he came and he created this empire. And I always tell people what he did is he just created more of the pie for himself, right, and for his company. But the pie was always big, and it was divided up into more jobs, into more of a profit margin for different promoters. So no, he didn't make it bigger. He just monopolized it to what he wanted to become. It's a big difference. But going to what you were saying, in my mind, because I used to work in the film industry when I was in my 20s, and I'm a storyteller, I'm a writer, I still write. I've romanticized pro wrestling, right? Not so much now, because I think now it's a completely different business.
Yeah.
But there was an era where this business was, obviously it came from the carnivores, or carnivals, I say, whatever.
And carnivores, probably.
Yes, I'm drinking wine tonight. I'm blaming that. And so it was always gonna be a carny business. It was gonna be a shady business. Its roots are in that, What is a mark, right? A mark is somebody that was a mark, so you could take money from. You
take advantage of them. Yeah,
you take advantage of them, but you have to signal them out first. That's how they caught them in the carnivals, right? So so just understanding that and how it evolved, and it was very much like a Cosa Nostra thing, right? With like a mob mentality, and there was this honor amongst thieves, but it was always the shady business, and because of the hubris of the promoters, and because of Vince McMahon's genius. Because Vince McMahon, when he was young, he was such a great chess player, right? I mean, he saw 2, 3, 4, 5 things ahead. Even when we were covering the Vince McMahon of '89, who was an older Vince, he was still so smart, to the point where I would be like, I didn't even see that.
Mm-hmm.
He was so smart. Remember, we covered in '89 where he was trying to actually contact Ted Turner, and he was saying why it was bad for business to have contracts. Who would even foresee that, right?
Con man would, for sure.
Yeah, a con man, but he always saw 2-3 steps ahead, whereas everybody's so focused on the immediate battle, right? And so he was not denying he's a lot of things, right? He's a lot of things, but he was also very smart when he was young, and so I always envisioned this very cinematic scene where he goes in when he buys the company from his dad, which is a total con, by the way. It was essentially a gift, but whatever. We'll get to that. Because when people make comparisons to him and TK, it was essentially the same thing when you think about it. Now he didn't have the capital that TK had, but it was a gift nonetheless. So he walks into this convention with Jim Barnett, right? Mm-hmm. Who at that time was, I mean, he was a homosexual in the industry where that wasn't really,
which meant he couldn't be president of the NWA.
Yes, right. But to me, it's so awesome that he had this guy who was marginalized in the business, who was actually one of the smartest guys in the business, and who found a way to use his brain to really be on top of the wrestling business. So here he comes, right? Vince McMahon comes in and he quits the NWA. He quits, and all these promoters, because of their ego, they're like, what is Junior doing? Remember, he hated Junior. Oh, mm-hmm. There goes Junior. Junior just quit the what a dumbass. He's gonna flounder without us, not knowing that him quitting at that time with Jim Barnett was a declaration of war, right? And so that's just so awesome to me. Like, again, just thinking about it, because remember, all these promoters, they think they're the smartest people in the room. So they're thinking, this kid who just got a gift from his daddy, why is he leaving? And so it wouldn't take long. It would be a couple months where you start to see his game plan start to show, and where he started going into all these different territories through syndication, started recruiting all the big stars, like an all-star team, kind of like what the Dodgers are doing right now, but but he didn't have the capital that the Dodgers had. Let's just put it that way. So yeah, and I don't think Hogan was gonna take any deferred payments, right? He wasn't gonna go for that.
No. Wait, what would the Dodgers example or analogy be of trying to promote Evel Knievel? Like something that was really kind of dumb and hyped.
That's true.
I'm trying to think of what that would have been for the Dodgers.
I don't know. Maybe trying to promote Kevin Brown back in 2000. Back in 2000,
yeah, I was thinking something about Adrian Gonzalez or something, but
he became a little cold hero here in this city. He wasn't. I don't think the numbers reflect how much of a contribution he had to the community. So I don't think he was that big of a flop.
Yeah. No, it's just one of those deals where the Dodgers had to sign Adrian Gonzalez, and this is kind of what the Giants are doing right now, which is, if you want to get back to being a team that players are interested in going to, you got to show that you're going to put big money behind superstars. And so Gonzalez, they probably overpaid Gonzalez, but it was proof to be like, hey, we're in the game here. We're in the mix. We're going to be looking for bigger players. And this is a show of faith here. We're bringing in Adrian and the Giants signing Willie Adames. Like they Buster Posey even said, you have to show on the field why players want to come to your team. And that's kind of the deal. So, no, I mean, I like the thought there with McMahon and trying to create an all-star team. And essentially he's trying to get everybody who's worth a damn in wrestling. Now, as we'll learn, he won't get a Von Erich. Well, at least not until 1990. There are some other players like Nature Boy Ric Flair, Dusty Rhodes. He's not going to get those guys immediately, but he's getting a lot of talent and a lot of the top talent from the other territories, which we'll get to in a second here. Here's something that was really interesting as I was doing my research and going, starting in 1983, Dave's 83 yearbook, which is, it is a yearbook but it is also kind of like an issue at the same time. So it's got all the historical 83 stuff, but it is his one issue of the month, so he's got to put news in at the in the back end of the issue. So the format, and this is what the Observer looked like in 1984. Basically, Dave would have his lead story, and then when he would go through the news, he would go through it very similarly today, but it's all based on the territories. It's like, here's what's going on in this territory. Here's what's going on in Japan. Here's what's going on in Mexico. The central states, world class, Florida. And he would just go through every area. And I was thinking about this. It had to have been so much harder for him to cover the news in the spread out way that the wrestling business was, rather than mostly just covering two companies like he's doing today.
Yeah, and also because how close the business was, right? And so it was hard to get information. So he had to also just start to cultivate a lot of these sources that he had for a long time. And he's shared in the past, where he would have the actual houses, right? What the house drew, and that's how he started getting sources with the wrestlers, because the wrestlers wanted to get paid, so they would hit up Dave, who would tell them the real number of the house, and then that's how he started like creating his source list. And of course, he was smart enough to start getting connected with a lot of the local promoters, the arenas, right? And later on, he would start getting connected with the cable industry, which is something that he still has to this day, and so that's something that, again, talking about people that are forward thinkers, that's kind of how Dave also kind of created his own market, and he became very successful too. So in a sense, we're seeing not only the success of Vince, but also Dave Meltzer as we're covering this era, because this is where he starts getting more consistent with the newsletters as well, whereas before it was done bi-monthly, then it was done monthly. So yeah, and then I think he has a whole like issue where gets all sobby because I think it was late for the people that follow Dave. It was later in life. It wasn't. He actually started this as a full-time job, I want to say like 89 or something like that. It wasn't something, people think that he started writing full-time since like 82, 83, but he was doing the whole soccer thing for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
And then somebody, I don't know if it was his girlfriend at the time, I forget. And I know people in the business, they convinced him, hey, there's a market here, go for it, go full time, and he did. And then he has a very emotional issue of the Observer. I forget what year and what month it is, but yeah, where he starts thanking everybody, because I think it started making him real money at that time.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so the thing that surprises, or maybe even catches him off guard, is how fast Vince McMahon goes from Backlund to Sheik to Hogan. So this issue, this yearbook issue, it's like, oh my gosh, like the Iron Sheik just beat Bob Backlund. And at this point, Dave is not a Backlund fan. Dave's, a lot of the same Dave comedy that we'll see over the years with guys like Dusty and, other wrestlers who he just does not think put forth a lot of effort in the ring. Clumsy Bob Backlund is one of them at this point.
And remember, folks, worst promotional tactic in 1982 was a simple blurb that read Bob Backlund as WWF champion. No context, nothing. Just that's all you get.
I wanted to rewatch this before we started, but I didn't get to. The angle for Sheik and Backlund, which is obviously taped a few weeks ahead, but it runs on the weekend TV right before he loses to Sheik. Obviously, the Iron Sheik busts out the Persian clubs. Bob is supposed to hurt himself trying to use these Persian clubs. And I think he's actually supposed to, I don't know if he takes a bump or he gets hit or Sheik hits him or something. But as he goes down, I think the Persian club is supposed to like hit him in the shoulder or something. I think that was what it was supposed to happen. But it didn't work out, and he gets back up and he kind of conks himself with it. And so, that Dave's writing about how they have a great house for the Madison Square Garden, but I'm sure he thinks, based off of the lame television angle, that is the reason why the crowd's not really into the match. But they also don't know that they're seeing what is about to be a title change with Skolin throwing in the towel and Backlund, having to lose the match that way. So at this point, Dave also mentions, Hogan is coming. And I guess Vern decided to match whatever Hogan was making with Vince. But the demand that it sounds like, I'm only saying it sounds like because this is like December 83, January 84 Dave. It at some points he'll correct himself if he gets any of the story wrong. So I'm just kind of saving us from that in case he does. But basically, he wrote that Vince or Hogan wanted a run with the title as a promise to come over. And then he also wanted Dr. D. David Schultz to be his opponent in one of his title runs or whatever. I don't know if it was like he just felt comfortable with David Schultz, or maybe he thought if anybody was going to mess with him, his buddy, who legit could help him out was there. Whatever it was, that also seemed to be one of the things that Hogan wanted from Vince in order to come over. Dr. D. David Schultz.
Yes. Well, they were boys. I mean, they were just like you said, they were comfortable with each other.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, he couldn't save him his job, but later on down the line. But he was there in the beginning because of Hogan requested it.
So Dave's reading of the situation at the end of 83. So this is before Hogan actually gets the strap. Dave thinks that they were going to utilize the 6-year anniversary of Bob's original title win to keep Bob in the mix as the challenger before moving over to a newly turned babyface, Sergeant Slaughter, and then turning to Hogan by spring, summer. And he was thinking that Sheik and Hogan, that they could do it at Shea Stadium. And you do the whole build, and then you build to the big summer show. Mm-hmm. And then he wrote, and this is again in late 83, he wrote, then you turn Andre heel, and Shea Stadium wouldn't be big enough to hold a show of that magnitude. And Dave called this in 1983.
Yeah. I think we talked about this back when we're for whatever reason we were talking about Andre Hogan in 87, and we brought this up. And yeah, it was a trip. He called it. He called his shot.
So then, I found this to be really interesting. So Vince is actually not only looking at the U.S. and Canada, he's also looking into Japan, and he's thinking about running a third Japanese company with what is it? Shashi Shinma. Yes. He's looking to work with Shinma. And then in Greece, Spiros Arion. He's trying to make some connections there so that Spiros Arion can send his tape around the loop in Greece as well. So Vince is not only thinking U.S. at this point.
Yeah, very ambitious, right? And he was always like that, very ambitious guy when it came to this stuff.
All right, so this is not only about WWF, but I imagine most of this show is going to be about WWF and sort of how Vince McMahon's business or his ethics affects all these other territories. But things that I didn't know, or that maybe I tangentially knew but didn't really remember, that came up in some of these early issues. Precious, you remember Precious, gorgeous yes. Jimmy Garvin's wife and valet. She was previously known as Moonbeam before becoming Precious. I didn't remember that one.
I didn't know that either till right now.
The territory that Dave is writing about. Now, Dave is actually in Wichita Falls at this point, so he is near that territory. But World Class is the territory that seems on fire more than any other territory in early 84, late 83. So Dave's writing about World Class.
I would agree with that. If internationally, I think New Japan is a little more. But I here in the United States, yeah, I would agree with that.
He had written like the Star Wars show in 83. I forget how many people they had turned away, but he kind of made a joke because he's like, they turned away, 4,000 people and it was freezing cold outside. They couldn't even get in the building. That was showing how hot they were for that show. And also, now here's something we'll talk about the next time we have a conversation about 1984. David Von Erich passes away.
Yeah, he passed away eating a big old steak.
And
Bruiser Brody went to take the piss and he flushed the toilet before the cops got there. How that happened? He was trying to be respectful, I guess.
And he's writing about like how people in town, like David Von Erich is such a giant local celebrity that it's like the same stories you would hear about Elvis when Elvis died, like people crying and like really affected emotionally and sort of can't believe that this happened. And that was how they reacted to David Von Erich's passing. So we'll talk more about that in the next episode, but I just wanted to put that one out there so we can put a pin in it until next time.
Yeah, and also that next time we talk about that, I also want to talk a little bit about how the territories had these like local, larger than life celebrities all over the place. So like Carlos Colon, who pretty much allowed Invader to get away with murder because of his celebrity status. So there's a lot of examples like that.
And then I don't know if I've ever asked you about. We may have talked about it, but maybe we'll also talk a little bit about Iron Claw and how they depicted a lot of what would happen and what was happening in this time frame. Okay, so let's talk about the first Starrcade. And what's fascinating is when Dave writes about the very first Starrcade, he's writing about it as if they have found a way to reinvent the big show in professional wrestling. And the reason why I find it fascinating is because in a matter of like 2 months, Starrcade is like forgotten, not forgotten for the performances or for the matches, but it's no longer the story anymore. It's like, oh, Vince gets Hogan and Hogan wins the belt and Vince is taking all like that. It very quickly transitions to that. And but right when Starrcade 83 happens, Dave is writing about how they may have actually sold like 100,000 tickets all around that Carolina area, not only for the Greensboro Coliseum for the live show, but also all around all around the town as they were showing the show. I had heard about what do they call it? It wasn't pay-per-view. It was
Closed circuit.
Closed circuit. I had heard about closed circuit mostly because of the Inoki and Ali fight. That was the first, like, even though that was right around when I was born, so it's not like I had understood what that was. But when it was mentioned, when closed circuit was ever mentioned, that was the reference, which was Inoki and Ali. So I'd understood that, okay, that happened, but it failed. And so now they bring it back for Starrcade, and they only do it locally. And I think they do it in, do they do it in Puerto Rico? They do it somewhere internationally that it's a
there's a
giant
few.
success.
There's a few international cities that they did it in. Yeah.
And so Dave is just in awe of the business side of things, how they were able to take a show and, in order for this show to happen, they had to actually take the belt off of Flair and put it back on Harley. And Flair was doing great as the champion. So they were going to be, they sort of knew that they were more than likely going to be down in houses over the time frame that Harley was back to being the champ, just so that Flair could beat him again at Starrcade and like kickstart, like, we're creating this pro wrestling superstar and this phenomenon and this kind of big show atmosphere. It's the first like real big show in wrestling history from a television perspective or from a closed circuit perspective. That whole scenario is amazing because we just talked about Vince McMahon's foresight, Jim Crockett's foresight as well. Now he kind of, like every good, I've listened to this podcast. I don't know if you've heard this podcast called Acquired, and it is really about like origin stories of businesses. And so you think of something like Amazon. Amazon doesn't exist without Walmart.
Mm-hmm.
And Walmart doesn't exist without the version of the superstore that came before them. And so they're kind of stealing each other's ideas and making them better. And so Vince McMahon and WWF, eventually they're going to take this Starrcade idea and they're going to do it bigger than Starrcade and eventually run the NWA out of business in that way. But just the idea of where we're going in 1983 with Starrcade and putting all of the marbles behind it, leading up to this one show on Thanksgiving, and we're running, and then all of a sudden 2 months later, Vince is like, sorry guys, like, I know you guys had a great show, but we're just taking all the good guys.
Yeah, and that's what I was saying earlier. Again, like when I said that I romanticize a lot of this wrestling history, just in life in general, is like we're all connected in a systemic way to like our own little environment, right? And then the actions of that affect us, and if that doesn't happen, we don't do this. And in hindsight, you think about it, and it's like, okay, I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be, right? And I'm sure it happens with you, it happens with me, even through the bad times. And yes, wrestling is the same way. Like one thing that was done by someone helps something else. It evolves with something else, etc., etc. Even like with technology, right? With technology has really influenced the wrestling business, and technology here is to the point where Ted Turner has already shot his satellite up in space, so he already has a super station. So all of a sudden, it's like, okay, it's just a matter of time before somebody fully goes national. And it ended up being Vince. I mean, there were other promoters. Georgia was national for a while, but Ole Anderson was very hard headed, and he didn't see the future, so he was still very much regionalized, even though his product was national, which is incredible to think about.
Yeah.
um, and Bill Watts also had some national outlets here and there where it was out of his territory, and he did try. He just didn't have the capital to sustain. So I think, again, you wonder who dictates what, right? Does technology dictate the business, or the forward thinkers of the business are the ones that push the business forward? It's the same thing. Let's take AEW, right? Let's take AEW. AEW couldn't exist in its form back 10 years ago, 20 years ago, because television wasn't paying what they're paying now. So again, the success comes from where technology's at. The television industry is very important. And in this particular case, we had the introduction of closed circuit, which, again, I think this show Starrcade was a good guinea pig for Vince to see there's a market there for that, and I could capitalize on that later on. And he did. It took a while, though. I think a year and a half is a while. I mean, because I think Jim Crockett's mistake is that he didn't start running another one until a year after.
Yeah.
Like for as successful as this show was, supposedly, I don't know the financials because Dave doesn't go through them yet. Maybe he'll cover them later on.
Yeah.
But Jim Crockett just kind of sat on that for a while. He could have done the Great American Bash, 85 on closed circuit, but instead he just ran the towns.
Yeah.
Or 84, I should say. So yeah, I mean, I think even though Jim Crockett was ahead of the curve with this discovery, he didn't really do anything with it. Vince saw it, he capitalized, and then what happened.
Yeah, that's a fascinating thing that you just said, which is he basically telegraphed what he was doing, right? He's like, we have Starrcade, it worked. Now we're going to do it again, but we're not going to do it again for another year. So we're going to build up all of our stuff for that time frame. And if you're Vince McMahon, you're like, great, because I'm going to get Piper, I'm going to get Valentine, I'm going to get these other guys who are kind of on JYD, Paul Orndorff. Eventually he's going to get Randy Savage, who's like the hottest star in the industry, the hottest young star in the industry.
Right.
And I do wonder, because I had this thought, like, and maybe you've done some research on this. So Starrcade and that world-class show Star Wars, they were more towards the end of the year.
Mm-hmm.
WrestleMania is in April. What is the reason why WrestleMania is in April?
I have no answer for that. That's a good question. That's probably why they've had. Maybe that's when he was ready to take the gamble. Because you
Yeah.
also have to remember that it took him about a year to build that momentum, right? I mean, that's what. That's why, if you notice in my analysis right now, I didn't criticize Vince for not jumping on the success of Starrcade
Right.
early on because he's busy trying to clear syndication. So he's got other, he's got to build the foundation before he takes this plunge. So I understand it took about a whole year of Hogan going around the loop and getting over with the towns, introducing a lot of the new talent. Then we have Black Saturday, which we haven't talked about. So all
Mm-hmm.
of a sudden, Vince owns Georgia. Um, and that's happened in July of '84. So there's a lot of changes in Vince. Vince has a lot going on to where I could understand why he's quite not ready to go into closed circuit just yet. And then maybe in March he was ready. Maybe that's just so happened to be because it's actually March, not April, when WrestleMania 1 takes place. I think it's March
Right.
31st.
You're right.
And so maybe that's just when he was ready, because nobody's ever really talked about it. Out of all the 1,000 talking head documentaries we have, it seems like thousands talking about WrestleMania. Nobody has ever asked Vince why March. And I'm sure there's an answer, but then again, who knows?
Yeah.
Why
That might be
why-
one I have to pull my Big Dave card on and ask him.
Yes. Yeah. So that's interesting. But I mean, at the end of the day, he did it, and it changed the business.
Okay, so let's talk about Starrcade. We don't have to go through the whole thing because it was at the end of '83, but I hadn't watched this show. I don't know, probably about 5 or 6 years. And like I said, wrestling has changed so much, obviously, in all of this time. So I did not expect to see, anything that was fast moving or that was going to work in today's era. I think
You did see a 20-year-old Tony Schiavone, which was weird.
Tony Schiavone was actually really good. The problem with Tony Schiavone on this show was he had all of these segments planned. And it's like, how many Ric Flair interviews can you do before the match? Like,
Right.
I think the idea is like, there's stuff that's important happening on this show. You cut back to the locker room, and the locker room, right? It's where stuff happens, and it's where it's behind the scenes. And so I think that was the idea. I just
Yeah.
don't think they had necessarily the most interesting topics to discuss, or how could you relate it to what Rick's there was one. Who was it? It was Wahoo and somebody next to Wahoo.
I think it was Angelino Mosca.
Okay, it was Mosca. He had to just lay there for like 4 minutes
That's right.
in blood. And
blood,
he was
yeah.
I'm like, can we get this? Where's the doctor? Like, why is this guy so bleeding so much right now? He's gonna pass out. But it was stuff like that. So kind of it was comedy, but it wasn't meant to be comedy necessarily. But when you're watching it back through the lens of 50 years almost, or no, 40, 42 years or whatever.
Yeah, don't age us, man. Don't age us that much. Come on now. But yeah, at that time it was supposed to be this big thing, right? This big novel thing, because I don't think they had these backstage interviews like that, and it was one long 3-hour production, so it was that kind of cutting in and out between matches. But you're right, they didn't really give him a lot to work with, so he really had to improvise.
So what did you think about the main event? Ric Flair gets the title back against Harley. They did the whole bounty gimmick throughout the summer. Bob Orton turns on Rick, and they put him in the neck brace, and he teases retirement, kind of like, the Terry Funk thing that
he did it many times.
Yeah,
he did it many times. He did it, but he was young here, so I don't know how much people actually believed it. I mean, they botched the finish, right? So,
yeah.
So there was that. And it was okay. I mean, it was of the time, it's hard to answer those questions when you're seeing like Will Ospreay every fucking week and shit, so it's really hard to answer those questions. But for the time, it was a good match. I mean, it was a Harley match more than a Flair match, I think.
And Harley's whole thing was like, this is a sport. We shouldn't be wrestling in the cage. And he's kind of the old stodgy guy. Who would be today's equivalent of putting...
I think Gunther maybe.
Oh, of Harley for sure. I'm thinking of Gene Kaniski as the referee, as like the old ref who can barely move.
Oh, there's a bunch of them in Mexico, but here in the United States, I think because this is such a cosmetic business, WWE doesn't allow those guys to hang out that long.
Yeah.
Because even like little Nate, I mean, he could still move, and he's in his 50s.
Yeah.
You know, and they have another one. Is it Doan? There's a couple of them that have been there forever. But they could still move.
I
All the
wonder,
other,
but like, okay, so former champion of yesteryear, you're talking, I don't know when he would have been the champion, but let's say 20 years prior. So you're talking about early 2000s.
I think if they get Mick Foley in there, he would struggle.
That's probably the equivalent is Mick Foley.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, you're right.
I wouldn't want to see him in there, man. I think he would break something. Because I was gonna say you could throw Jesse Ventura in there now, but I don't think Gene Kaninsky was as old as Jesse Ventura is now.
Now, if I was to show my wife this show, from the very little amount of wrestling that she knows about today, I think the one thing she would say is, how come the matches just end? Because that's what I realized in 83 is like, Gordon Soley has no idea when the finish is coming. It just happens, and he's like, and the match is over. Like, you know, everything is so telegraphed today, and it's so built up, and it's Michael Cole trying to set you up, you know, for whatever the finish is. But yeah, that's the one thing. Like, what is it? Cowboy Bob Orton win with like a knee drop or something, and the match just ends. It's like similar stuff, you know, very simple stuff like that.
Yeah, like Roddy Piper just unloads in a very like graphic way on Greg Valentine, and he just pins him.
Yeah.
You know, and it was funny because it's very real violence. There's blood, there's punches. It ain't no wrestling spots. He's punching him, and then he decides to hook his legs with a chain,
Yeah.
which is so cartoony. You know, and I'm
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
after all that real violence that we just saw, you hook this guy's legs with the chain to pin him. Typical Roddy Piper, man. So that made me chuckle right there.
How did that dog collar match hold up for you?
I thought it was great. I thought it was real. I thought it held up in the way to where you don't see that kind of wrestling nowadays. But because it's very real. I love that there was a comeback where Roddy Piper's trying to unload on Greg Valentine, and Greg Valentine just starts choking him as a comeback. So it's like a real fight, you know. It wasn't no fancy wrestling spot or comeback or move out of the buckle spot. It was literally he's blocking, and then he starts choking, and then he drops him, and then he starts choking him even more. And I'm like, damn, I wasn't used to that because we're not used to that kind of style anymore.
The bloody ear, or the blood coming from the ear, that visual. And then as a person watching, you kind of imagine, like, what would it feel like to have blood coming out of your ear? That's the one that always freaked me out, that I was like, oh man, that's really kind of taking you out of the, you know, out of the fake part of wrestling. And you start
Right.
wondering, it's like one of those moments you start wondering, okay, like, are they going too far? You know, today you have to bring scissors and forks and stuff into the ring, because you can't just do the blood from the ear, because people are so numb to anything. You got to go like, you know, above. And I'm sure, you know, they were saying back then, you know, doing a specific move, you know, you're numbing the fans to this, and now we have to do more just to make the fans believe. Like, and we are at a much higher level of that here in 2025.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. No, but I love that match. That was my first match on the entire show, and it still holds up today. Like if you were to put Kenny Omega and Mox, and they had this match today, spot by same spots, I think it would be a like a 4.5-star match for sure.
Yeah, and then Roddy Piper is soon to bail out. Same with Greg Valentine. Dave writes that Roddy is going to be managing Paul Orndorff
And Dr. D, right?
Is it Dr. D?
Yeah, it's Dr. D and Orndorff from because me and Danny love that television because of his promos. I mean, they're very on PC, folks. Don't watch them, please. But we chuckle. What could I say? Sue me. And he's very yeah. So he's their manager. And then eventually he starts working because he just but Vince recruited him for his mic skills. That's why he originally recruited him.
And Dave wrote that while Piper's mostly going to be a manager, he wants to see Piper in the ring because from a believability aspect, Roddy Piper is much better than a lot of the guys that they have in WWF. But the thing that holds Piper back a little bit is his size. He's not as big as all these giant people.
Right.
And then and you know, you mentioned the talking thing. So he takes Mean Gene out of the AWA, and basically Mean Gene replaces Patterson on a lot of stuff.
Yeah, which
But
is good.
yeah, which is good. But the thing about Mean Gene is they're going way more into the talking, because Mean Gene himself is a little bit of like a television draw. Like, people like watching him on TV. So Vince is putting him on TV, interviewing the guys a lot more, which was a change from how they were doing the shows before they got Mean Gene. So leaning to Mean Gene talking, and then you mentioned Piper talking. So they are kind of changing the trajectory a little bit there.
Yeah, and also Vince, I mean, for better or worse, Vince was never a guy that was all into work rate ever. He never cared for work rate. His whole thing was getting the characters over, and what better way to do that than to give them promo time? So Vince was always more about the promos and the character and all that stuff. So that's probably why we saw that change as well. And having Mean Gene there, who's a legend, and who when you see him now, you see how phenomenal he was at the little things. Great improv guy, just he knew how to get people over. Um and so he had the right guy to kind of carry that era of promos.
There's a moment when Hogan wins the title. Everyone has seen this promo before. They're in the locker room. Hogan has his parents there, and I'm sure somebody was probably trying to shock both mom and dad in the back, like, at least show some expression here. You guys don't have to look like dead people. But Hogan is doing the, I'm so turned on right now, whole thing. And he spits because his mouth is dry, because he's just nonstop talking. And Mean Gene sees the spit fly in front of him. Now, I don't think that it actually landed on Mean Gene. I think it just went past him. But he kind of did this thing where he looks at the camera and he kind of looks at his jacket as if to show the audience, like, I saw that this dude just spit on me. And then Hogan stops. So as Mean Gene is kind of doing this, Hogan stops, does not skip a beat. Boom, gets the next question in. What a pro.
Yeah, awesome. He has thousands of those. You could see a whole compilation on Gene on YouTube. He's just, well, what a loss to the industry, because there's nobody like him.
No.
And we shouldn't say that nobody has ever been allowed to be Mean Gene or have those same kind of abilities, I should say, because there's only one Mean Gene.
Ricky Steamboat and Jay Youngblood defeat the Briscoe brothers for the NWA World Tag Team Championship. And Ricky Steamboat is soon going to retire from Crockett, instead of just continuing or just leaving at that point. So what he does is he retires, and I'm sure we'll talk about this in a little bit. But when he decides that he wants to come back, the reason why he leaves to WWF is because he doesn't fit in Dusty's booking patterns.
That's right.
Like,
That's right.
can you imagine not having a spot for Ricky Steamboat?
Well, it's okay. So here's where it gets interesting. I don't think that Dusty didn't have a spot for Ricky as much as Dusty had his own guys.
Yeah.
Dusty was always a Barry Windham guy. Dusty was always a Magnum TA guy. So it's like any booker, right? Or going back to baseball, any general manager or director of baseball operations or whatever term you want to use. It's like when they come in, they have their own plans, their own guys. And unfortunately, there's no room for the other guys. Even it doesn't mean that the other guys don't have the ability. It's just that they're not what these guys bring, which is when Dusty came in, he convinces Barry Windham to jump ship because Barry Windham is in the WWF at this point. And then he brings in Magnum TA, and he starts trying to build around them. So it's just a different mentality, a different, different guys and stuff.
All right. So the Briscoes, we will hear more about those two guys as we talk about Black Saturday, like you mentioned. And Ricky eventually will make his way over as well to Vince McMahon's WWF. All right, so This first issue, now I'll give you a little bit of background on how Dave is writing at this point. Dave is basically writing monthly, like you said, but it jumps from January to March, and I tried to ask him about this. I don't really think he remembers why, but in March, he's basically saying that, and this is him understanding where the wrestling business is going. He's basically like, either going to have to go monthly or bi-monthly. And if that is the case, gonna have to raise prices, brothers.
Yeah.
Because he's publishing more and he's mailing out more, which is a bigger cost to him as well. But this is where things are going in wrestling, and he sees that, and he knows that he is going to have to adjust too.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so there's some rumored people who may be coming to WWF, and this person never, ever made it. But the first person that Dave talks about being rumored is one Bruiser Brody.
By the way, let's give a quick plug to Dave. This is the one that we're talking about. I'm sure you can find it on Amazon, but you get all the 84 observers here.
Yes, it's a great book. It's different writing, and it is a 41-year-old writing, and
it's a writing of a 25-year-old is what it is.
It's a younger dude.
It's not a tight, like I noticed right away, it's not this tight edited, it's there's a lot of words that it's not that they don't make sense, but they're out of place, stuff like that. It's very conversational is what it is, his writing, whereas later on it would become very much like a book,
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we have that in the YouTube summary of this show. The link to Dave's book, if you want to buy it, is in there. I will put it in the show notes as well. It is it's very, like, Dave and I were talking about this on Wrestling Observer Radio, like, what's the book of the year? And I'm like, the one book that I read that it took me the full year to read was the 89 Observers. I don't know what it was, like, page-wise, but my phone told me like 1,000 pages or something crazy like that. And, I got through the whole thing, but it took me the whole year. That was the main thing that I read from
this was 400.
Yeah, so this one's a little bit less for sure. So some other stuff this year. So Dave's writing about Satoru Sayama.
I don't think you said who was going to come into WWF. I think.
No. So the rumor was Bruiser Brody, and he never made it.
Okay. Yeah, he never made it. That's true.
Why do you think
he? I mean, obviously with Bruiser though, he was very hard to deal with, and he probably went in to talk to Vince. He had his demands. Vince was like, "Bro, I'm building a territory here. I have a vision. Eventually you're gonna feud with Hogan, but just hang out here for a minute." He probably said, "Nah, I'm good." And then unfortunately, the rumor, and I don't know how much truth there is to it, or how much has become legend, is that he was on his way in '88. So
yes,
that's always been the story.
Yes, yeah. And then you mentioned the tragicness of him passing. So Sayama, the original Tiger Mask, will be coming to the U.S. and wrestling in WWE in March as the Tiger, and he will be used as the top native draw when McMahon and Shinma team up to promote not only in the, I'm going to put this one in quotes, Orient,
yes,
but perhaps throughout Asia, the South Pacific, Australia, and New Zealand. And he said Shinma spent the New Year's holidays of 1984 in New York.
Yeah, they were definitely doing business together. So, and that business relationship would last up into 85, I think. And then there was they, as per usual with Vince, he pissed someone off, and then that relationship was severed.
Okay, so the competition, obviously, the promoters all know what's going on. Dave writes that all of the promoters have decided that they are going to work together, except for Eddie Graham. Eddie Graham's like, screw you guys. I don't care what's happening. I'm not working together with anybody.
Yeah, but he was already at the tail end. He was losing it by this point.
Yeah.
To the point where he would be dead. I want to say a few months from this.
It would Super Bowl 85 or 86, because I remember the story.
So 2 months later after this, yeah. Yeah, he was already in financial ruins, and he had relationship issues. Dusty had already jumped ship. Dusty had gone to Crockett to book for them. That's one thing we didn't mention. This was pretty much Starrcade '83 was pretty much Dusty's introduction to being a Crockett guy full time, coming out of Florida, because I believe Starrcade '83 was actually booked by I want to say the Briscoes. I think booked most of it because they had the book at this time for Crockett. um, a lot of people think it was Dusty. It wasn't Dusty. Dusty was booked to be on the show, the introduction of Dusty, and then he would eventually get the book a month later, and then he would book most of '85, and so on and so forth. But yeah, so Dusty had already left Eddie Graham because the territory was already failing, and Eddie Graham would have unfortunately take his own life like a month or so after this.
Mm-hmm. Dave has a quote on competition. Basically, what Vince is doing. It will force stagnated promotions to either get with the times or forget it. It will give the fans a greater variety of wrestlers to see and a chance to make a real decision of which promotion offers more entertainment per dollar spent. The wrestlers will also be better off as competition will escalate salaries and they will be able to play one group off against another, both financially and egotistically. Now, whether they will be boosted to main events, given championships, etc., I can't find fault with McMahon offering these wrestlers and announcers greater benefits and having them accept it. The one thing Dave was opposed to was Vince using his political stroke to lock other promotions out of buildings.
Well, he did that, that's for sure. And this was before Dave actually hung out with Paul Bosch. And Paul Bosch was the one that, in my opinion anyway, just my opinion, I'm not saying I'm right, uh, put it in his head that Vince is the worst person on earth. And let's just say that that's a pattern that I've kind of noticed ever since. But yeah, so this was Dave being a little more neutral and just trying to be open minded. Unfortunately, he was wrong. I mean, his concern was validated when Vince did, keep people out of arenas.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but you know what's sad about that warning from Dave is that nobody listened. Nobody. Like I can't think of one promotion that listened. Yeah, Crockett survives, but that's because of Turner's money and Turner saved them. But then Turner, that was a shit show for years before they lucked into those year and a half, 2 years of beating Vince. So technically speaking, nobody listened. Like, you could say Bill Watts was more a product of the finances of the time in the oil business and stuff, but still, he wasn't gonna survive anyway because all his guys were leaving anyway. Um,
He's putting
so
JYD against Nikolai Volkov in main events at this time in Mid-South.
horrible. That's a cure for insomnia right there, if you ask me.
And
What
Dave also wrote, I haven't really watched a ton of Mid-South ever, really. But Dave was writing that Watts was kind of overdoing the USSR angle and basically saying that World War III is about to happen and Nikolai Volkov is like the messenger. I haven't seen that stuff, but that's what he thought Bill Watts was going way too over the
I've
top.
seen it because I love Mid South. Mid South is such ahead of its time. I mean, to me, when we think of Raw and Nitro, we got to think of Mid South Television first. They had a lot of those cliffhanger endings. That introduced that whole like one episode storyline kind of
Mm-hmm.
shows. So they were very ahead of their time. So I've seen that run a couple of times, and I did see those angles, and I could see why Dave would say that because yeah, one of the things that I didn't know that was news to me reading this month's Observer from January '84 was how much people were tired of JYD. Because I always thought when he left to Vince, he was still this beloved main eventer all over the territories. But Dave is saying that there was certain parts of the Mid South territory that are already kind of turning on JYD, to the
Mm-hmm.
point of boycotting. Um,
Yeah,
now
in Houston, they were boycotting the idea of Junkyard Dog being on top.
Right. And also and I guess Bill Watts was fixated on just the Louisiana portion of his territory where he was still over and he stayed over till he left with Vince. Um but yeah, so that was news to me because I always thought JYD was beloved in the South. I didn't know that. And Dave alludes to this idea that it's because he's getting out of shape that the reason why they're turning on him. which I don't know if I believe or not, because Dave is such a musclehead that maybe. Um, did I ever share? I'm sure I've talked about this on this show, but this story always pops me when that Oli Yada show, right, where Dave tells Brian that he had that nightmare about being in a bigger body. Like,
I don't remember that.
but he was so freaked out. It was a different era, whatever.
Yeah.
But he was so freaked out. Like he's telling Brian, I woke up and I was fat. I was fat. and so because I mean Dave's such a body guy, so the fact that he's I don't know how much I believe him blaming the junk food dog over the fact that he's getting a little out of shape.
Yeah, he's not calling him JFD yet in this.
No, that
this
would be later, way later.
Not yet.
Yeah.
I've talked to him about this. He said when he was younger and he was training, he said that people would tell him that if he actually did get on steroids, he could be like a competitive bodybuilder in contests and stuff.
I mean, what do you think? I mean, he's not a big guy,
No, he's like
stocky guy.
5'8".
I don't know. Maybe.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, he's still at, in his early 60s. He's still got the arms and the traps for sure. Like this dude could literally walk around without his shirt off, and like people would go like, "Oh, this guy's got a great body," and then you would tell them like he's also 60 years old, and they'd be pretty freaked out.
Well, he's like our buddy RFK Jr., where the face, where he's got the body, but the face gives it away. You know what I'm saying? Anyways.
Okay. The one thing that you talked about Dave's reporting, and Dave is also a fan, and you can tell what Dave likes and dislikes. You can tell that while he sees Vince coming, he also just thinks that the WWE style is really boring. And so his thought process is that WWF can make their inroads, but when you put the shows against Vince's shows, the local shows are going to be better because they're going to have the better wrestlers, and it's going to be harder for WWF to sell tickets in some areas. And this is historically the way that he talks about his wrestling fandom. Like we just went through 89. It's all about WWF is the better business. It's the better production. They have better marketing. Over the top, they get better visibility, better PR. But the NWA is the style that he likes better. They have better matches, even when they kind of kick themselves in the rear end because they screw things up. When it comes to the matches, they're still better off. That is how he's always talked about wrestling, even to today. Like he would rather watch, Will Ospreay versus Kenny Omega in the Tokyo Dome than whatever WWE is going to put in the main event at WrestleMania. Like he understands the magnitude of WrestleMania, but simply for his wrestling taste, he goes better match over everything. Like that's just always been kind of for his own personal enjoyment. And so we see that in 84.
Yeah, but I think the irony of that, and again, it's his right to do that. Like he could like whatever he wants, and I think he's cultivated an audience that supports that, which is a whole another conversation. But I think the irony there is that his view of wrestling has never matched the reality, especially when it comes to finances. So sometimes I wonder how much the observer is a custodian of history, because it doesn't correlate with what actually is happening. As far as WWE is the biggest game in town, and they have been for years, for 40 years. But they don't care about work rate. Now they have great workers now, and they've had some in the past, but the idea that it's all about the in-ring performance is something that's like it's not important to the WWE, and it never has been. So where Dave, on the other hand, has always been all about the athleticism and the 5-star matches, and that's where the disconnect is, And I do believe that there's a part of Dave that for a while, 2019 to 2022, for the first time, he was kind of winning that, right? Because he was like correlating all these sold out buildings in AEW, the great wrestling. and that's being taken away now. And we're back to because WWE stepped up their game. They have great wrestling now. You're never gonna see a bad WWE show. Um, and you mix that up with the drama of great storytelling. That's what right now they're hitting on all cylinders. But we'll get to that when we're talking about modern wrestling later today. So so yeah, so you're right. It's always been about work rate with Dave, and even here, because here, like we're gonna start seeing him transition over to like the love for New Japan, because of Tiger Mask and those lighter weight guys. So yeah, so that's kind of where he's at.
All right. So he does mention, which is what you talked about Ole Anderson a little bit. Here's Ole Anderson's idea to compete against Vince McMahon. Well, all of Vince's new wrestlers, they've all come through our territory before. We're going to show matches with all of those wrestlers, even matches that they win, but we're just not going to show the finish, and we'll say that they actually lost. This was Ole's strategic thing to fight Vince.
Very egocentric. Like he's got like, even in that statement, he doesn't care about the audience. What about the finish? I want to know the finish to the match.
There are some fans who know exactly what happened because they watched
they were there.
it.
They were there. Yeah, he was always, I don't know. I think he's overrated as a booker, personally. And I remember when Dave did his bio, and I still thought he was overrated. He's very hard-headed. He never wanted to evolve. It costed him. And then he got bitter over that. And then he blamed everyone else. So he never took accountability for his mistakes. He reminds me of Bischoff in a lot of ways.
All right, let's talk a little bit more about Hulk Hogan. So Bob Backlund was originally set for the return match against the Sheik on January 23rd. But on local television on January 12th, it was announced that his shoulder wasn't up to par and Hogan would get the match. Dave writes that he's told that there had never been a run on tickets like there was preceding the show, and scalpers had a field day once it was announced that Hogan was getting that match instead of Backlund. That's a draw, brother.
Yeah, he's over. He's over.
I was watching like I said, I was watching some of the St. Louis stuff, and so he beats, I don't even remember the gentleman that he beats. He beats a Guerrero who I don't think was one of the Guerreros, but the guy's last name is Guerrero.
Yeah, I think I read that. You're right.
He does an interview for a battle royal, and all up from, every interview that he's doing, like he's talking about being new to WWF and the fans are behind him and Americana, but every promo he does say at the end, and I want to win the title, and I'm going to win the title, and I can't wait to win the title. And so he's like driving that home all throughout, and he's not there for that long. Like he's only there for like a month before he wins the title. So, but
Right.
every promo's driving home the fact that when he wins this match, it puts him closer to the world title. That is something that is often missing in our wrestling today. And some of it is because there's like 8 titles on every television show. But that stood out to me. I was like, oh, wow. Like I can imagine why these people were super fired up to see history or whatever. When the title doesn't change, but every 7 years, like you may see something that's actually kind of cool.
Yeah, I think Cody did that when he first came into the WWE. I don't know if you remember. Like he would tease. He started talking about how his dad never won it, and he had his eye on it. And then that was kind of like the start. Like he would every promo he would tease you that he was going for the title until he was part of the storyline to go for the title. But yeah, that always works. And you're right. They don't really do that nowadays.
I just watched Dynamite. Now I'm not done with today's Dynamite, but Jay White does an interview, and Adam Copeland asks John Moxley for a title shot, and Moxley says no. And so then Jay White gets the mic, and I'm like, oh, Jay's going to outsmart Mox and get Mox to put the title up in Brisbane. Nope. He just says, how about we have a tag team match? I was like, why would you ask for a tag team match?
God.
What's
it's like the
on?
UFC guys that don't want to challenge any fighters. Remember that?
Oh, yes. Who do you want to challenge? whoever Dana gives me, I'm a
Yeah,
team
whoever
player.
Dana gives me, they're all the best. And I'm like, oh my God, you don't understand promotion.
So right before Hogan wins the strap, Dave is writing that Bob Backlund has been replaced in almost every city by Hogan, and Bob may even be gone from the circuit and out of the business by now. Hopefully, this will all be explained in the next few weeks. Arnold Skoland is no longer working for the WWF as part of Vinny's centralization of power plan. And not too long before Skoland, Buddy Rogers was also let go by Vince. And I think Buddy sued Vince when Vince fired him.
Yeah, if I remember correctly, he did. Yeah, and he never brought him back. So, um, and yeah, Vince is cleaning house, man. He ain't messing around. He's starting to build his own little inner circle. And Arnie's not part of that. Now, what surprised me is how fast this happened. Like
Yes.
1 minute, Bob Backlund loses the belt, and then not 3 weeks later, Arnie Skoland's not even in the territory anymore. Now Bob Backlund always said, I don't know if you heard this story. He always said that he was supposed to turn heel right after the Hogan run, and he was supposed to go. He was supposed to challenge Hogan around the horn as a heel. I don't know how truth there is to that. I mean, they weren't really booking like that back then. But who knows? And yeah, Hogan took his place at that Garden show.
So similarly to what you just said, Dave writes that he was a bit disappointed at how quick they gave the belt to Hogan because it shows McMahon has no intention of varying from his rubber stamp style. And I think what he meant was championship has to be on a babyface. Babyface is going to hold it. He's going to fight off all the heels. We're going to bring a new heel into territory. He's going to go around the loop, fight that heel. And we're just going to keep circling them in. And Dave was saying, he wanted to see a little variety, but at the same time, one
No,
company is doing it the right way and it's working. So why would you change?
that was Dave the fan talking. That's what that was. That's what he wants to see. But for business purposes, Vince McMahon Jr. did the right thing, and he did it all the way to '88. He ran with it, and it made him a lot of money. It was working. The formula worked. Big heel, wash, rinse, repeat, over and over and over.
Now, what do you think of the idea? And this was what Dave was talking about at the time. Instead of Sheik, I believe Sheik was 44 at the time he beat Backlund for the title. Dave was writing that Morocco might have been a better champion for that run than Sheik. But Dave also wrote about that, I think, thinking that it wasn't going to be off of him so quickly.
Yeah. Because I was gonna say you don't want to waste Morocco on those 3 weeks. Morocco's too good for that. But then again, Morocco never had a run against Hogan, so I don't get it.
He had my
um,
favorite Saturday night's main event match against Hogan in '86.
that was a good match. Yeah. But that was a one-off.
Yeah.
But no, if it was gonna be for the 3 week thing, you just need a guy, a guy, and the Sheik was the guy.
All right, let's go around the horn a little bit here. So you mentioned the junkyard dog thing in the Mid-South. So Dave wrote, the dog has let himself get out of shape almost to the point where people refer to him as the Black Dusty Rhodes.
Now that was a shot at Dusty and JYD.
And
That's messed up.
JYD. While his physique certainly doesn't look nearly as bad as Rhodes's, his work rate is very similar, meaning none. To make matters worse, the dog won't sell for his opponents either, making for a string of truly horrible main events.
Yeah. He hated JYD.
So in the AWA, because Hogan leaves, the crowds are down, but this was even before he knew Hogan was going to WWF. This is like a crazy difference in houses with Hulk Hogan on the card versus Hulk Hogan not on the card, because Hogan is in Japan at this time. San Francisco goes from 12,000 on October 22nd of 93 to 3,500 just a month later because Hogan is not advertised for the card. In St. Paul, they go from 19,000 to 6,500 in a month. And he said the St. Paul crowd was the smallest in over a year. And
And
that was
that's their home turf. I mean, you know.
Timothy Drake had a note here. He said Morocco had a 3-match run against Hogan at Madison Square Garden in mid '85, culminating in a cage match. I bet you those matches were good too.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I'm sure I've seen a Hogan Morocco match on one of those old Hulkamania tapes or something too.
Yeah. Timothy, is any of those on YouTube or anywhere we could watch them? I wanna know because I would like to see those matches.
Yeah,
Um,
that'd be awesome. Okay, so then also in the AWA, and just think about the time frame. We're still talking late '83. Bobby Heenan continues to beat Buck Zumhoff, who's the junior champion in AWA, in a series of bouts billed for the light heavyweight title, in which Bobby misses making weight by 1.5 pounds, causing Buck to retain the belt. Bobby, I would, that there's a, I don't know if it's an alternate universe, but Bobby the Brain Heenan as a wrestler, if he was like 2 or 3 inches taller, he might have been, one of the top workers instead of one of the top managers.
well, he was a lot like Ray Stevens. He just knew how to take these amazing bumps, you know. And he was a great talker. I mean, it goes without saying. So yeah, I mean, I think his talking ability would have gotten him some good main events there in his career.
So in the Central States territory, Dave has an unconfirmed rumor that Vince is buying out Harley Race and Bob Geigel. I think he calls them something mean, like the Chrome Dome Connection or something like that.
Yeah, like him and Harley. Well. That's that. Okay, no, that would be later when Vince launches at Harley's feet. That's when Harley doesn't want to do the run in at the Garden because he has a couple offers for. Didn't he also offer to pay him off to like no show or break Ric Flair's leg or something like that? That was the first time. I might get my stories confused. At Starrcade, and then Harley says, "I gotta look myself in the mirror every morning."
Yeah.
The answer is no. And then Vinny just launches at him, and it's like, man, that guy had balls of steel, man.
Yeah.
But then later on, he also offered no. Shiki, they also offered Cheeky money to break Hogan. All these
that's the Vern story, right? It's to break Hogan's leg or something. Right. The Harley Race story that you're talking about, there's a really cool Substack called Wrestling Playlists, and they're going over all of the matches in the years and in the months that are available on YouTube or whatever. I think they may even have like a Discord or something where they linked some of this stuff. But somebody, I think it's Charles. I don't know if Charles is the one who is the guy who's the main writer for it, but he wrote this fantastic story on Starrcade '83, and he kind of related it. He weaved it into a Terry Funk story, saying Terry Funk saw in the late '70s that when he would go out and see people, whether it's at the bar or just in public or whatever, what he realized is they knew just as much about wrestlers outside of his territory than inside of his territory. And what he realized is that it was because of cable television. And so he saw the writing on the wall, and then that's when he sold his territory. So the whole story, like the story, that's like the lead to the story, and they're talking about Starrcade. And Charles had written that, Vince offered him to come in, bring the title, and no show Starrcade.
That's what it was. Yeah.
And then I can't imagine he was going to give Harley the title, but he could have lied to him and said that was going to be the part of the deal. But so that was the thing. And then we heard the story that Vince tried to like wrestle him when Harley said no. But who else has a similar story? Not from a physical standpoint, but I think Vince tried to also get Howard Cosell to be an announcer, and I think Howard Cosell had mentioned that when he said no, like Vince got really mad at him and it was like just turned mean or something like that.
Typical Vince. That's typical Vince. Yeah. Because Central States at this point is struggling quite a bit. They had started to run in St. Louis, because that territory the St. Louis at the Chase, right? It was called the St. Louis Wrestling Club.
Mm-hmm.
They at that point they were no longer running, and Matisic had started running his own promotion at that time, and they were running tapes from Central States, and they weren't drawing because it was in St. Louis, you know. And so Harley was losing a lot of money on Central States because I don't know. I mean, we should have said this in the get-go. Harley was the owner of Central States. He was one of the co-owners. So that was his territory. So he was just bleeding money. And so Vince saw that, and Vince saw weakness, but Harley wouldn't sell. And it wouldn't be till 86 where Harley had to come and take a job because he was broke. And I'm really surprised that Vince didn't bury him more than he did, because he gave him the King gimmick. Although I think the King gimmick was supposed to be making fun of Harley, even though somehow Harley got it over somewhat. But yeah, he I would expect him to have been buried more. But then again, maybe Harley would have told him to F off, you know? It's like,
Mm-hmm.
I'm not gonna, you know. So yeah.
Okay, so let's go to our favorite section of
How's it going, everybody? Dave Meltzer here. For the next 2 hours, we're going to be talking pro wrestling.
Pro wrestling. So only in the Observer, where I kind of take some snapshots of certain stories that you're only going to find this in a wrestling newsletter. Like no other publication is actually going to report on
In
this.
his wrestling newsletter, you should say. You said a wrestling newsletter.
Well, the way that he writes some of this stuff up, would probably only be in his. Gino Hernandez, the great Gino Hernandez. Dave writes that Gino Hernandez was fired once again after missing several bookings. Gino was scheduled to win the Southwest title before he split the territory. Last I heard, Gino was in Greenville, South Carolina, opening a nightclub. And then in the same paragraph, like this wasn't like a new paragraph. After he wrote that Gino's opening up a nightclub, Gino's 11-24 bout with Casey in San Antonio was actually a really good match. Somebody who we'll be talking about a lot in the next episode, Mike Von Erich, the 19-year-old 170-pounder who debuted on Thanksgiving, also has scored a few wins over Roberts, who I assume is Buddy Roberts.
Right.
His problem is that he has the body of a swimmer, not a bodybuilder, as two of his brothers. He looks ridiculous inside the ring, and every sense of reality disappears as he throws around his much bigger and more experienced foes. He really should have waited a few years before debuting. He is also terrible to go along with that, but most everyone is terrible when they debut, so I don't hold it against him.
Yeah, but he's body shaming, man, and also he's kind of feeding into that what wrestling is. He's playing Vince McMahon's game, is what he's doing, you know.
Yes,
so
he is.
But Mike Von Erich did suck in the ring, so that he was right there. He never got better either.
Well, there's going to be a match, and we've talked about this, where he faces Ric Flair, and the whole gimmick of the match is that if he goes 10 minutes with Flair, I think his brother gets a title match, or there's something there. And so like Dave just talked about this rookie who's really terrible. And Rick has talked about this match in just like how bad it was. And he knew that it was bad, but it's kind of his job to get this guy through the match and make it slightly believable.
Right. No, yeah. I mean, and the match isn't bad, but I guess when Ric Flair was trying to get out of him, it was difficult during that time.
All right. I never knew this, and so I put it here. Rick Rude was in Dallas on January the 6th for the singular purpose of studying Jimmy Garvin and imitating him, and then taking that act to Memphis. Had you ever heard of that?
No, but I don't even think I saw him as a Jimmy Garvin clone in Memphis. So
no, he didn't. He didn't. I mean, it was a cocky guy, but he wasn't preening and like doing the hair and like doing the strutting like Jimmy Garvin.
Maybe I decided, fuck it, I'm gonna do my own thing, you know.
All right, last one. Now you remember the football league during this time frame, the USFL.
Yeah,
the one that Donald Trump basically ran into the ground.
I've seen the documentary.
So Dave writes in one of the issues, one last note. Lots of people say bad things about the USFL, but I will never do such a thing. The reason is that any organization which can keep Steve Williams out of pro wrestling is fine with me. I wish Dr. Death the best of luck with the Denver Gold, or at least enough luck to make the team. What was the problem with Dr.
I don't
Death?
know. That's harsh, man. Like, what's going on there? Because later on they would become buds, right? He was one of his friends.
But think about this. Okay, you're a newsletter writer. You're starting to get some popularity. You know that people in this business are not going to like you just for the sake of you writing about the business. And then you pick on Dr. Death, who's like the craziest man, like could just rip your head off of your body.
Yeah, for like, well, I mean, we have no context, but it seems for like no reason, you know. It's just like he just
because he's not good yet or something.
Yeah,
I think it's just Dave writing comedy because he would.
What? And he's 25 years old. Let's not forget, 25 years old. He's a kid at this point.
Yeah, for sure. All right, so that is the end of our 84 history stuff, and we'll come back next time, and we'll talk really in depth about the David Von Erich thing and then everything else that's going on. But we are doing a current wrestling component, and you have some questions from the KLB Facebook group that we're going to answer, and then I'll just get your thoughts quickly before we get out of here on the Royal Rumble. I got him.
All right.
Peter Harrison.
I like how you're going to start with that one.
Well, it's just the first one on my list.
Okay, go for it.
It's a two-parter. Will the Dodgers win the World Series? And will the Giants make the playoffs?
I'm going to say yes and no. And I'll tell you why. You know what? I hate the Giants. I hate them with all my passion. Yes. But I think the Padres and the Mets, and yes, because I'm thinking the Phillies or the Mets are going to flip-flop. Either one's going to win the division, one's going to claim a playoff spot, and then that's going to leave the Padres, and that's where there's one open, right? It's not going to be the Giants.
It'll be somebody out of the Central, maybe.
Well, not necessarily, because they're going to have their division winner, and they're, historically they're the weakest division. So it could be 3 West Coast teams. That would be crazy. Because I'm already, as you notice, we already clinched the division. So I'm not even throwing us in the playoffs. I mean in the wild card.
No, I think you guys are going to win the division. The Padres and the Diamondbacks, I think, are clearly ahead of the Giants from a talent perspective, for sure.
Yes, and I don't know if you. There's a lot of the Dodgers have been doing podcasts, and they're saying that they were scared shitless of the Padres, man. They were saying the Padres had the better team. A couple like straight up have said that they had the better team, and that was their World Series. Like once they got through them, it was like easy after that. But the Padres were like a really good team.
Oh, because they had knocked you guys out a couple years before that.
Yeah, but we had Freddie Freeman on one leg. We had a 3-person rotation, including a rookie. And yeah, everything was going for them. Remember, they were coming off that end of the season momentum too. They had a lot of momentum. So I think their team is still fairly good. So I'm gonna go with them as one of the wild card spots. And the Mets, I mean, I think the Mets are gonna have a wild card spot for sure. They've put so much money.
They got Alonso back today.
Yeah, he needs to fire Scott Boras, man, because somehow in modern day baseball, bro, let me ask you, how do you negotiate down? That's my question. This guy they gave him an extension for what's it, like 5 years, $100 million, and he ended up he signed for 2 years, $54 million. And I'm like, you negotiated down, brother. You need to fire Boras.
Yeah, if he doesn't have a good year, it's gonna get worse next go around. He has to have like a great year.
Yeah, but that's Boris's story. That's how Blake Snell ended up with you guys for a year. He thought he was gonna go out there and get those big contracts. Nothing worked out for him, and he went with the Giants. And now we have him. So I'm very happy about that. But yeah, no, we're gonna go back to. I'm not gonna sit here and say we're gonna win the World Series because anything could happen, especially in baseball, especially in 3-game series, 5-game series. But I think we got a fucking all-star team, man. We're built to win this thing again.
I said it last year. It was the best. It was the best 1 through 9 lineup that I'd ever seen in my years of watching.
But this year they really invested a lot of money in the pitching. I mean, they're jacked when it comes to pitching. They're gonna have a six-man rotation this year. When's the last time you saw that? I mean, I share with you that I'm hoping that maybe Ohtani doesn't have to pitch at all this year, so he could give us the offensive numbers he gave us last year. Because if he pitches, he's not gonna be in the lineup every day. The Dodgers they have such an embarrassment of riches that they just designated for assignment Ryan Brader, right, who had a 1.96 ERA in 70 innings. The Cubs just picked him up, but they had no room for him.
Yeah,
because they have all these studs,
Kirby Yates.
We got Kirby Yates,
Tanner Scott.
Jesus Christ, man.
Well, I did this thing for my Giants podcast, and we kind of took a look at all of the acquisitions and the subtractions and stuff. So the Diamondbacks, they had 3 notable acquisitions and they lost 6 notable subtractions. The Dodgers had, I think it was 9 notable acquisitions, and you guys only lost 3 players.
Yeah, Buehler was one of that one hurt a little bit.
The Giants had 2 notable acquisitions, lost 3 players, being Blake Snell and Conforto to the Dodgers. What we are hoping is that
they all get gout. All the Dodgers just get gout.
That's one of the things. But what we hope is that you guys get the curse of Conforto, because we had the curse of Conforto for these last 2 years. And so that's what we hope as well. But yeah, I mean, when you look at it, the Padres have only really signed one person, and they have lost a lot of talent. So that may, that may come back to bite them in the butt, but still, 1 through 4, the Giants are the 4th least talented of those 4 teams. So all right.
So gun to your head, are they going to the playoffs or not?
I would probably say no, and I think they'll be kind of what they were last year, fighting for 500.
Okay.
Okay, so the next question by Peter H is All In Australia. Oh no, so it's Grand Slam Australia. He called it All In Australia. Just your thoughts on the card and if the show will be a success.
Well, it depends how you define success. I don't think it's already a success. I think it's a PR embarrassment that they had to downgrade from a stadium to a arena or whatever it is. I think they're making the best of it. It's already financially a success because they got
paid for it,
by Max and by the city. So they're not losing money on it. As far as like the in-ring, I mean, I haven't seen today's Dynamite because I was getting ready for this show, but they have Toni Storm, in her hometown. Danny sent me a picture of her today. I guess she was in her skeevies.
I think she was supposed to be dressed as Mariah. I haven't gotten to that part of the show yet.
Okay,
but I'm only 70 minutes.
She's a very attractive woman. Let's put it that way. and then the tag match, right, with the Callis family against Omega and Ostrich. So, I'm looking forward to it.
So I don't want to excuse, and this is kind of the booking that I don't like. But so Omega and Ospreay, I have christened them the Omega Powers against Takeshita and Fletcher. That should be a fantastic pro wrestling match. It should be a great match.
I love that vignette. That vignette had KLB written all over it when they're in the mansion, and Don Callis has pictures of himself, and with the music and everything. That's something that Vince McMahon would have booked back in '88 or something, and it was awesome.
But the part I don't like is that now we have this one great tag team match. So then they just added a second one. It is now Adam Copeland and Jay White against Jon Moxley and Claudio. But this one is like a no rules match or whatever. So that's what separates it. So they kind of have 2 of the same style feuds, both in a tag match on the same show. However, the one thing I would excuse them is if they do put Toni Storm in the main event, winning the title from Mariah May, because I think at least from the perspective of like big moment, she's the hometown hero. I think that could be pretty fantastic as a way to end that big show.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. And since there's no title match, that might happen because I know that Tony's very strict on the title match going last, but there's no title match on this show because Mox is in a tag, so
Yeah.
it could happen. Now are we gonna do the Paul Levesque here? Are we only getting 5 matches for this? Oh, because it is a 2-hour
It's
collision.
a 2-hour
Right?
collision, so
Yeah, which a lot of people from that part of the country were not happy about. But
well, so the Grand Slam Dynamite is usually a really good show. They usually stack it on television. It's one of their best, highest rated shows, whatever you want to say about it. So the idea that it's a Grand Slam, you're telling viewers that this is a juiced up show. But yeah, it's not a pay-per-view show. It's not like a Max specific show. It is just like a television show. That's what it is, especially to us viewers. It's a souped up collision after the All-Star Game Saturday night stuff is over. So
maybe 2 more matches and then that'll be the card, right? Because they got.
Buddy Murphy and Okada.
Oh, I didn't know that. Okay, cool. That's gonna be a good match.
I think the other one, I think it's you have to get the other guy to say bitch or something because that's all the whole promotion is for the match so far.
That's the whole promotion for his character so far, not just the match. And so essentially this is gonna be a Saturday night's main event for AEW. It's really what it's gonna be.
For sure.
Yeah, so I mean,
and it'll probably be their highest rated collision of the year. They did one in December that came after a football game, and it was like twice the number that they usually do, just because they were able to keep some of that audience. So I would expect this to be. I actually kind of wonder if the collision number, the audience number, has a chance to beat the Dynamite number. The demo number probably won't, but I think that for next week, not this week, for next week, it could beat the audience number for Dynamite.
Now I do know that WWE hurts AEW programming when they run against it, and they do have the NXT show that same day. So
earlier in the day,
okay,
not head to head.
All right, because usually
it probably still will hurt it a little bit.
Yeah, we'll see. I'm not really into NXT right now, so
Shawn Michaels, man, this dude must have a weird sense of humor for as much goofy shit that is on that show.
I'm very disappointed with Julia. I really am. I thought she was gonna. I mean, and it's always like that, right? I was disappointed with Nakamura. It just, they just have to fit into their, like Triple H said many years ago. You gotta use our playbook now.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of disappointed with her and her run. And so I'm not really into that championship.
What about Vaquer? What about Stephanie Vaquer?
Same thing. She's not doing the stuff that she was doing in CMLL, or she's more tame.
They're both also like just kind of like happy-go-lucky baby faces in a way.
Right. And I feel like they didn't really get over in the Royal Rumble, and that's kind of like a testing ground. I was expecting Julia to get more of a pop, but I think her stay in NXT has actually been a detriment, because when she got there, she was over, and she's less over, and that's never a good thing. Even though she's the champ. On the men's side, I'm not really into that main event scene either. So I don't know. I'll watch the show because
I think Oba and Trick could be cool, but they're kind of actively avoiding going there directly right now.
Yeah, and then the booking sucks. Like having Eddie Thorpe involved, it just muddles up the waters. So it's not really my thing right now. Now I know I texted you that I was very disappointed with the Royal Rumble itself. I rewatched it, and then now that I have more context, it was actually a good Rumble. Like because one of the things that disappointed me was how a lot of the later eliminations had no consequence, but then come to find out that LA Knight fucked all that shit up. I was wondering, like, it was so awkward when Drew got thrown out, and there's like, there should be a bigger deal here. What's going on?
Yeah,
and it was just like a transitional thing. Oh, he's out, he's gone. And then the way Damian Priest kind of got eliminated was kind of like a nothing thing. The way Logan Paul got eliminated was kind of like a nothing thing. But now that we're starting to see how the Elimination Chamber is going to play out, actually, all these eliminations are starting to make sense to me. Because John Cena eliminates Logan Paul, and they're both going to be in the. I'm assuming Logan Paul's going to beat Rey Mysterio,
Yeah.
and they're both going to be in the chamber. They did tease me with an AJ versus Logan Paul WrestleMania match, which I don't know if that would be kind of cool, but I don't know if Logan would go for that. Maybe he thinks he deserves a higher level opponent.
Did you notice that when AJ came back, he looked more like normal AJ than like the super jacked AJ that we saw last year?
Yeah, no, I mean, it was obvious. Yeah.
What happened?
Well, I think it helps his foot to be lighter.
That's a really good point.
And so and he got his old theme song back. And so yeah, I mean, I'm excited, and he looked good. I mean, he was moving good. We're never gonna get the AJ of like 10 years ago, which is the AJ that I kind of want to see, but I know, Father Time beats us all. So rewatching the Rumble, because I always have this tradition where I watch the Rumble again every year the day after. It's like my little Royal Rumble hangover thing.
But you don't watch the women's one; you only watch the men's one.
No, I watch both of them.
Okay.
I watch both.
Those are two long ass matches too,
dude. That's the thing that pissed me off too. Like, how the hell do you have 4 matches and it's 4.5 hours? Like,
yeah.
And that takes me to another point. Triple H and the WWE, it's so weird, man, because they're immune. Like, their fan base eats everything up right now. I've never seen anything like this, period. Like, they can't do anything wrong. You know what I'm saying?
Oh, dude, I will point something out, and nobody cares about what I just. Okay, I'll give you an example, because our next question is about Cena, but I'll bring this up.
Okay.
Yeah, so John Cena comes back on that Raw, the Netflix Raw, and he goes through this whole thing about how he's never going to have a title match ever again. And then he goes, "Oh, I could win the Royal Rumble." Like an epiphany hits him. And then, "Oh, I could win the Elimination Chamber." So enters in the Royal Rumble, last 2, loses the match. In a promo, at the stupid press conference, he just goes, "I'm in the Elimination Chamber." I'm like, oh.
Yeah, I saw that promo.
Maybe they're just going to put these guys in. Nope, everyone else has to wrestle a qualifying match except for John Cena. And so I was asking about that. I'm like, why does John Cena not have to do it? Now, I know why, probably for schedule reasons. But someone had mentioned, they said, well, his story is that he hasn't actually won a televised match in like so many years. So if he actually wins that match to qualify for the Rumble, then it changes the trajectory of the story. And I said, I understand that. So he's the glorified jobber that just was number 2 in the Rumble after all these years. Like, it doesn't jive with me. It doesn't make sense.
No, I don't like it either.
He should have had a qualifying match. He should have popped the crowd by winning the match. And then he throws his hat in, "I'm winning the Elimination Chamber," and then you go. So again, what you just said, they can kind of do whatever they want, and it doesn't matter. And this is something that Dave said a couple of times recently, which is, AEW has to do things better than WWE in order to even just, get any visibility. And WWE doesn't have to. They could make mistakes, but they're so hot that it doesn't really matter. So that's what also makes it really hard for AEW. Because I watch AEW and I go, I don't like this and this and this and this and this. And then I watch WWE and I go, oh, I don't like this and I don't like this. And then I think, yeah, but no one cares. Like, no one, who cares? Like, nobody's like looking at it that way. They're just looking at how much fun they're having, yeeting with Jey Uso, which is
they got that UFC 2006 to 2012 era of like, it's a party and we're gonna come and have fun, which is awesome to have, right? That's also reminds me of like the early Nitro era with those Nitro parties. Like, you can't do no wrong, but it's going overboard now. Like, this is a 4.5 hour show and nobody complained. And I'm like, yo, like, I love wrestling, but justify the 4.5 hours. How do you only give me 4 matches and 4? There was a timing issue. Like you said, these Royal Rumbles went on forever. It was 3-minute intervals for some because of
that long ass ramp.
Right.
They were walking it, and and then they would get halfway and go, "Oh shoot, I got to kind of jog into this thing."
But they need to have a system to where they use another ramp for the if they're going to run a big stadium. Because if you notice, they have an exit ramp, so they don't. So the guys that are leaving don't bump into the guys that are coming in. They have another ramp set up there, and that's a shorter ramp that goes back to the dressing room. Use that ramp, or have like a little gimmick where you start halfway, because you know how the ramp turned this year, like they that little turn, like have a gimmick where they start in that turn. They don't have to come out. I don't know, do something, but don't give me a hour and 30-minute rumble. And it was funny because they fucked up their own records because of their timing issues.
Yeah.
Now it's like
Roxanne Perez is like the
the
longest ever in
longest
the
because
Royal Rumble.
because she happened to be in that fucking rumble that had 3-minute intervals,
Yep.
And so yeah, they fucked their own shit up. But yeah, that's a complaint that I have. I mean, these shows, and then what about the whole celebrity thing, man? I know they have that boxing UFC thing where they're showing the people in the crowd, but man, one after another, and it's like, yo, we get it, like you're hot, but again, in another era, people would be complaining. In this era, it's like, nah, you're out of touch and this or that. Okay, whatever, I'm there's a lot of problems. I'm not happy about this rumor WrestleMania card. I don't care. I don't want to see Roman versus Seth Rollins versus CM Punk. I don't think that's an interesting match to me. I sure as hell don't want to see Cena in the main event against Cody Rhodes.
Okay, so that's the next question. That was from I think Charlie. He wanted your thoughts on Cody and Cena and what direction they should go with it.
They shouldn't go in any direction. Cena should be here as the glorified nostalgia act, kind of like what Tanahashi's doing in New Japan. He should be in the mid card.
You don't want to see him win the title at all?
No, because there's a couple of reasons. First of all, there's a certain expectation, and I'm gonna sound like Dave here, but I'm not as harsh as Dave is when it comes to. I like my wackiness, but there's also a certain expectation of work rate in the main event scene, right? I mean, and Cena ain't gonna do nothing. Like we saw at the Rumble, he didn't even do his high spots because of the movie commitments. Like he's gonna do his nostalgia act is what he's gonna do. I don't care if he's in the main event or in the first match, and that kind of nostalgia act doesn't belong in the main event. If they do the gimmick, which is my biggest fear, of him only winning the Elimination Chamber and then just doing promo work all the way till Mania, he won one match, and Cody's gonna, you know what I'm saying? And then the thing is Cody gonna do the job for him? I fear this is gonna be like Hulk Hogan was in 2002 when they gave him that little title run when he beat Triple H after Triple H beat Jericho at that WrestleMania, and then people caught on and they started booing him. They started booing Hogan. Now I thought that a week ago, but now that I'm thinking about this like cult audience that they developed, I don't think they're gonna boo anybody because they're literally doing what WWE wants them to do.
Right.
But I'm not excited for it. I don't care about Jey Uso and Gunther. If Jey Uso was gonna win the Rumble, protect them in booking. Protect them in booking. He's been doing jobs to the bloodline for pretty much all of last year, and all of a sudden they decide to do the Cinderella story with him. Come on,
Okay, so I want to hang on that one.
And he pissed me off on Monday because he made himself cry. He didn't cry organically. He was there. I've worked with actors, bro. I know when they're pumping themselves up to cry. It wasn't this whole like organic shit. And he ate up about 5 minutes trying to rile himself up to cry.
Going back to what you just said, that they can pretty much do anything and the fans are going to eat it up. Doesn't that mean though that it's a great time to push someone like Jey Uso to take advantage of what he has created? Right now, I'm going to use a bad example. The woo-woo guy got himself over at one point, right?
Yeah.
And Vince McMahon was like, "This is stupid. This is not really over. Right. This is not over. This is just, goofball stuff." So I think Jey Uso's being over is way more organic than the woo-woo guy. But I think in 5 years ago, Vince would have seen the yeet thing and he would have figured out a way to stop it because he doesn't want it to take over the stuff that he actually wants to get over as main card stuff. So they are trying to take advantage of that and saying, we're going to give this guy something because he was able to get over. We're not going to shut this down. And when your audience eats everything up, isn't that a good time to do something like that?
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, I don't know if it's the chicken or the egg here, but I agree with you. I don't know if he's over because he got over or he's over because the audience, that's what they're supposed to do is get him over. You just don't know. Because I mean, this guy has like a 10-minute entrance now. You know, of course it's gonna get over. You're doing people do this shit, and to me it's like, okay, like it's cool when you're there live, but when you're watching on TV, like, dude, for the first time I was getting pissed at my TV because he got about a 10-minute entrance, and then he's trying, like I said, he's trying to kind of get himself to cry, but he can't do it. So he's huffing and puffing, and then that takes another 5 minutes, right? And then finally he does it, and he's got nothing to say.
Yeah.
That really upset me. But anyways, whatever. It's gonna make a gazillion dollars. People are paying ridiculous prices to get into these shows. It's just weird, man. Like, what the hell's going on? What are these people drinking? What is
you see what the our political landscape is, so you know
that's
what people
true.
are drinking.
That's true, but I mean, man, I don't know. Yeah, we'll see what happens, man. Everything eventually goes down. I want to see how Paulo Vec does in a low period. He's never been tested before.
For sure.
He might lose his mind. He might be great. We don't know.
I mean, a lot of the stuff that Tony Khan had to deal with post CM Punk, a lot of bookers have to deal with. And right now, Paulo Vec, that's probably many years into the future, because they probably won't. It could fall off literally in a short span, but I think the playbook is not foolproof, but it is pretty close to being foolproof, and they can just keep running things at it. When the playbook stops working, that's when we'll see. Oh, okay. So from Eric, is Dark Match worth a watch? I have no idea what this is.
That's a movie that stars Chris Jericho. I'm gonna tell you, it's a wacky plot. It's on Shudder.
Is this the horror movie?
Yes.
Okay.
And I watch all kinds of movies. So here's the plot. So you have a wrestling promoter who, the movie starts, he's promoting wrestling. He has the female wrestler, the male wrestlers, and he's promoting in the South. And then he gets this opportunity to book a show in this little town. So he takes it because he needs money. So he goes there and he promotes this show in this little town, and that town happens to be run by a cult, by this Southern, very racist cult. Now, the leader of the cult is Chris Jericho, which is wacky.
I mean, is it that big of a stretch?
So then when they're there, they trap them into doing this like Running Man kind style games. It's no longer wrestling. Like, they have to actually like fight for their lives, and so yeah, all these guys giving us props on the KLB
shout out here
92 Rumble. All right, what's up, GG and Draven? By the way, I caught okay. We're working on doing more, so it's let's just say that it's hard to match up with Danny's schedule. I'll just say that.
Well, you guys got to do something for WrestleMania at some point.
I wanted
review or recap or whatever.
I wanted to stream the 2020 Royal Rumble, because I never shared this with you, but that one dethroned the 92 Royal Rumble. The 2020 Royal Rumble is my favorite Royal Rumble of all time.
Is that that's not the Drew one, is it?
No, the 2021, the one Lesnar was there in number 1.
Okay.
That was 2020. No, that's 2021.
Wait, who won?
What?
Was that Edge?
No, Drew, you're right. It was Drew.
Okay.
2020. I love that one. But I love
Wait, was that the one with no fans?
No. That was 2021.
Okay, the 2020 Royal. Oh, yeah. That was the last one.
Right.
Remember,
they shut everything down in March of 2020.
Yes.
And so Drew McIntyre wins that Rumble, but Brock Lesnar delivers like a 5-star performance in that first half. If you understand the business, if you understand professional wrestling, you'll see what he was doing, not only to get himself over, but to get other people over in that match. And man, that guy was huffing and puffing at the end. I don't know if you remember, man, because he was working with all kinds of different guys. They have all the little Easter eggs, right? Nakamura shows up, Shawn Benjamin shows up, and from longtime fans like myself that get all these little Easter eggs, like I was marking out. It was a great match. I love that match, man.
And that was Edge's comeback, wasn't it?
There was, yeah. That was Edge's comeback. That's right, towards the end. Yeah. And what a great match, man! That in 2020 Royal Rumble. 2021 was the one with no fans.
Yeah.
2022 was the one that Shano tried to take over. Remember, he tried to book that whole Rumble around him, and he got fired for it.
Yes.
And yeah. So, anyways, so I'm going to try to stream that one next because I love that Royal Rumble.
Steven says, "What's up, guys? Watching the stream. He likes when my shows with Dave. What's up, Steven? Okay, so from Hyro, since SummerSlam, I've noticed cracks in Triple H's booking. Company's still white hot. How much longer do you think this boom period will last?" You asked him for examples of the cracks. I don't have.
I have the answer here.
Okay.
So he says Cody's title reign being filler up into the KO feud, which he's right about that. I've been complaining about that ever since. Triple H had nobody lined up for Cody during the summer. He had all these one-offs. The 3-hour SmackDown is unwatchable at the moment. He's right about that too. And a lot of feuds overstayed their welcome. Priest versus the Judgment Day. And Rhea versus Liv. Well, those have already been blown off, which I think that's why WrestleMania feels like weird because they don't have any really, really hot programs right now.
Yeah.
My overall point is 2023 was much stronger creatively than 2024. Okay. It feels like after Mania XL, they're riding the wave like WCW did in 98. I think what Paul was banking on was to leapfrog to when The Rock came back and when Roman came back. So he had to get through the summer, except Rock gave him the news that he's not coming back. I don't, that's the only thing. But I agree with Hyro is that, yes, and I've criticized Triple H over this. He didn't have nobody ready for Cody. Nobody. And the KO feud, yeah, it was a good feud, but he had just used KO as a monster of the month, before, with no story, and then they had to backtrack to actually create a story. Remember there was that what was it? Was it Bad Blood? No, Bad Blood. He teamed with Roman. It was the pay-per-view before Bad Blood where he just wrestled Kevin Owens for like no reason, and Kevin Owens is like, "Oh, I don't deserve the title, this or that," and it was babyface against babyface, and then like a month later, he just turns and he just beats him up, and then
it was like it was like a friendly, like we're gonna have this friendly match, and then of course, then he got frustrated after that. But can I add one more thing to the demerit of Triple H's 2024?
Right, go ahead.
I'm not into Saturday night's main event after these two shows. I'm like,
no, you were you texted me after the first one and you were not happy, and I agree with you.
I was like, oh, it's a good show, but it's not. I don't need to watch it live, and like, if there's nothing going to happen, then I'll just watch it the next day. Like, it's no biggie.
Yeah, I agree with you. They're nothing shows. A lot of the PLEs are nothing shows. We talked about that, me and you. So again, man, we're seeing it. We see it, but nobody cares. So
yeah. All right, another one.
And you know what? Before we move on from this topic, I will say that, and keep this in mind, like AEW, their rabid fan base in 2019, they were almost the same. Not as extreme as this particular fan base of WWE now, but they were there. Remember that Roman Reigns got a lot of they were on him because he said that the AEW fan base were a little more leaner on the guys. They were more forgiving. And then my reply to that was like, well, it's your job to create that atmosphere. Like, you do it, bro. Like, that's your job.
Yeah.
And now it's completely switched, right?
Yeah,
now,
absolutely.
And I don't see Roman Reigns bragging about that now because it's,
We'll throw in a question here from Steven. Do you think that if they announce Okada versus Omega, that it will attract more sales for All In to possibly exceed our expectation for the attendance? Also, go Mets.
Well, fire Scott Boras if you're a Mets fan. No, I don't exceed our expectations would mean that stadium is packed, which is not going to happen.
What? Okay, so it's at it's like at like 12 or 13 or something like that at this point, I think.
If they were able to get 20, I would be doing cartwheel. Like, I would be so happy for them because that's, and I think a match like Okada versus Omega. No. I think Ospreay versus Omega in a rematch would put 20 in there.
You think so? Over
Bec-
Omega Okada.
yes, because that program is hot right now. Even though they're a tag team right now, they're doing that whole we're teaming, but we're teaming because of this in the future. We're gonna meet in the, you know what I'm saying? They're doing that whole thing. And look at the response these two guys get, man. They're like, they set themselves apart, dude. Like, it's like you're
Yeah.
watching another show when these guys are out there. Both of
Yeah,
them. Omega.
Kenny Omega specifically knows how to be a babyface. Now, here's my disconnect with this story. Okay. And again, when you point this stuff out, some people get really mad and some people want to weaponize it. But I'll just say this. So Omega comes back. They do the face-to-face thing. They look like they're really mad at each other, but then they get jumped and they got to fight off 4 dudes and they fight them off. And then Omega's like, I'm not really mad anymore. We could be friends. Like that was like the way to connect them to not be competitors and to actually be partners. So
Yeah.
the next week, watching the show, Osprey against actually not the next week, I think the week after. Osprey against Brian Cage. Don Callis says, "Look at the screen," and all of a sudden Kenny Omega is beaten down in the back. And I'm thinking like, "Oh, they actually want to show that Osprey is concerned about his new buddy." Osprey looks at the screen, looks at Brian Cage, and is like, we're fine. They wrestle the match. He doesn't think about Omega again. There's no urgency to finish so he can go see his buddy. Beats Brian Cage, gets jumped, and then Omega runs out. So he wasn't even hurt that much. Like, those are the things where there's a way to tell a story in a fashion to set up the next thing to happen. And a lot of the times when we're watching AEW, I was like, they just did like 3 weeks of television in 10 minutes. And it's
Right.
hard to care when they don't care about the actual story. That is my problem with this current storyline.
Right. When that's what I got from it, and I agree with you, the message could have been delivered 1,000 times better. But what I got from this story is that Kenny is all in on this team, but Osprey is not. And I understand that, right? Because Kenny's personality, even as who he is as a human being, this guy puts over Roman Reigns all the time. He puts over like he's a guy that wants to be friends with everyone. Whether he's being political or not doesn't matter. That his personality is that he's not gonna talk bad about anybody. And actually, when he does, it has more credibility because it's so rare, and he has. But in general, he wants to be a friendly guy, right? Who knows that everybody's connected in the business and everybody needs everybody. So in this situation, he's extending the olive branch to Will Ospreay because he knows that they got to get through the Don Callis family. But Will Ospreay he don't give a fuck. He still doesn't like Kenny Omega. He's just doing it because he needs him at the moment. That's what I got out of this. But look, everything I explained to you, I had to connect on my own head.
Right.
Like they never really explained that.
So if they actually do a feud down the line, you think at least there's a few little footprints in the sand that says Will would be the one to turn.
Yes. Right. Yeah. And whether or not the fans take to that, we'll see, because they're both very beloved. So we'll see.
All right, another question from the people in the chat. Do you think the revisionist history that WWE puts out there about Montreal is the worst? Because they always say Brett was taking the belt to Nitro and he didn't want to lose, when that can be debunked.
Yes.
Yeah, it's their Vince McMahon is a very spiteful person. He's also an egomaniac and a narcissist. So when something does not go his way, but it eventually did turn out his way, at the time it was not going his way, he was a giant baby about it. And that's what giant babies who get beat up and bullied do. They're crybabies, and that was his way of handling that situation.
But to me, the scary part here is, being a student of psychology and whatnot, is not so much the message that Vince gave, is the way that it's been received. Because a lot of people, fans and wrestlers alike, it's not that they believe that story, it's that they have to believe that story for their own sanity, right? And so somebody like The Undertaker, for example, he believes that story because he has to. It benefits him because that WWE pays his bills. If he doesn't believe the story, it's gonna fuck with him with his morals and his ethics, and he might have to leave. So it's funny how like sometimes we have to believe these stories for our own benefit, and that's what scares me the most, you know. And so and the Montreal Screwjob story has been told so many times that people need to believe that at this point.
Oh, what was I going? Oh, Scott Hall, before he passed away, he was on the dark side version of the Montreal Screwjob, which was an episode that I did not like. But at the end of that, he in his part, he was trying to say certain things about, like, if you were looking at this from the Vince McMahon perspective, there are some signs that would get you to believe. The problem is, like, he got the things wrong, so he came off a little I sort of saw it as he knows that it's in his best interest to be somebody who just is not sure what the story is, because then he could keep getting booked on these podcasts to talk about it. That's how I saw him being the ultimate worker. But this is, not too long before he passed away. But like, there are people who want to be in these documentaries. So Tony Atlas would be another one. Like, Tony Atlas will say some outlandish shit,
right?
And he's believable. And people behind the scenes will say, well, I'm not sure. But because he says it in such a way, he's going to get booked on all of these things. He got booked on the Mr. McMahon one. They're doing a dark side on Tony Atlas, I think, probably based off of him in the Mr. McMahon thing. So, yeah, again, these documentaries, whatever, the way that they tell these stories, these guys are still workers, and they're still trying to put forth a story that is entertaining, and that also, kind of keeps the storytelling aspect of this alive. Because, I'll be done with this, but before Montreal, and even after Montreal, people like you and I, we liked hearing the tall tales, and we kind of knew that some of them were probably not true, but they're fun, and so we enjoyed them. And Conan would specifically say, don't let a lie get in the way of a good story.
Right. And I've used that many times too.
But it is that one Montreal story where I feel like, when you go through litigation and when people's lives have been hurt and friendships have ended, it is probably best to tell that story for as much as Bret Hart went through to make sure that story was told in the right way. So that's the one where I'm like, okay, like, let's not be dishonest about this. We know what the truth is.
Right. No, I agree with you 100%. 100%. And just, before we move on, I want to give an example of where, like, it's human nature sometimes to need to believe a story. And I'll use myself, like when the whole betting scandal with Otani hit, right?
Yeah.
I think as a city, as a culture, because he's done so much for the city, he's done so much for the Japanese culture, and for the fans, we need to believe that he had nothing to do with it. We need to believe that his interpreter was all in 100%. Whether that's the true or not, we have to believe that, and so that's where we're at. So there's countless examples of that, and it scares me because it's human nature to want to do that. It's sometimes it's out of our control. But yeah, the Montreal Screwjob is a story like that as well.
Do you know what my next hope is? I always wish gout on the Dodgers, and not anything really harmful, more of like an irritation, like, a rash or something.
Well, gout sucks. I've had gout and it sucks.
My next thing is, I hope, the Lakers just traded for Luka Doncic, and he's he's a young man, and he's probably about 30 pounds too heavy, and he's still really good. But, like, the joke is that, oh my gosh, this dude is going to see the kind of food that you can eat in LA, and it's just going to get worse. And so my theory and my hope is that he and Shohei become really good friends, and Luka just fattens Shohei up. And so Shohei all of a sudden comes into spring training next year, hey,
looking like Bartolo Colon.
My XL, can I get double XL jersey? It just needs to be a little looser in the fit. That's my hope, is that Luka fattens up Shohei. All right,
He'll
next
still
one.
have the power, though. He'll still have the power.
From another one from Hyro. He's trying to find a comparison for Jey Uso, and he's wondering if you would compare him to Cena in 05.
Yeah, and he said that because of the moveset and whatnot. I think he's getting that. And I replied, I think he's getting that confused with the WWE style. The WWE style is very patterned around signature moves because they love the signature moves. So you'll see a lot of these guys, especially the top guys, they'll have their 3, 4, 5 big spots, right? Their big moves, and they'll hit them throughout the match. Bret Hart had that in the 90s. You know, he had the whatever, the elbow and the sharpshooter and the kicking on the groin and all that stuff, and the Russian leg sweep. So I mean, I don't know. I don't see it. I mean, Cena was 25 years old in 2005, 2006.
Yeah, Jay's 39.
Yes. And Cena, this is the big difference, Jara. I'll tell you the big difference. Cena was gonna be the top guy. He's gonna be the guy.
Yes.
Whereas Jey Uso is a whole just hot potato, is your turn kind of thing. So that's the big difference. Right?
I also see this a little bit as a test for Jey Uso. Like, okay, usually the journey to the title is when you are your hottest, and then you win the title, and the fans actually liked it better when you were the underdog on the journey. If he can win the title from Gunther and still be popular, and who knows how we even measure box office these days with Raw being on Netflix, but and the company being so hot that they're selling all these shows, without any matches announced. But
Right.
merch, crowds, how they welcome him, like those are factors. And if he wins a title and whomever his first title defense is against, it might be against Gunther again, you kind of have to see, okay, are his reactions the same? Are they less? Do people sort of resent him for being in this spot now? And then you make those decisions. But the fact, what you just said, he's not Cody. Like, Cody's the one, Roman is the one. Those are the guys. Punk, if Punk gets the title, those are going to be the guys that are carrying that championship and as the face of the company. It's not Jay, at least not yet. Jake may, maybe if Jay gets there,
Maybe
he
he'll
gets the
get there, but he's not
opportunity.
there yet.
But he's
Yeah.
that is not even what's going to be asked of him.
But
Like
as far as I can see,
the Cody and Punk segment from 2 Raws ago, where they were talking about what it's like to be the world champion and to have to make all of those early morning calls and to get to the markets and to do
yeah,
the
that just sounded
interviews.
hectic. I'm tired just listening to
Yeah,
it.
but Jay would not. I'm sure Jay will still have a hard schedule, but he's not having that schedule.
No, nobody is. Just the champ.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so Andrew wants to know, where's Randall K?
He's at home chilling like he's always been. The guy works his own schedule and he never does any jobs. And that's who he is. He reminds me a lot of Bobby Lashley. For whatever reason, both of those guys, they just get away with never doing any jobs anymore, or selling if they don't want. They don't have to sell, and everybody just accepts it.
He's hanging out with his wife, hanging out with his kids. He's eating well, and he's lifting weight.
We know that.
I think that's it.
I'm sure if he could fit himself into Mania, he'll get the big payday, and then he'll go home again. That's gonna be him for the next until he retires. He's not gonna be on the road full time anymore.
No, not at all. Okay, the next one is from Victor. What are some of the best wrestling documentaries out there? We could probably do a whole show on that, but what are some of your favorites?
I like Forever Hardcore. That's one that I've gone back to a couple of times. Very, very detailed history of ECW with all the people that were not in the ECW documentary from the WWE. What I always tell people to do is just combine both of them and make a day out of it. It has so much good information. The WWE one is very honest, which is weird because it's WWE doc. But Paul Heyman's behind it, so it was going to be honest. And so it's a good one too. So yeah, so you come Forever Hardcore and the ECW documentary are really good. The World Class documentary is really good. It's really sad, but it's really good.
We mentioned the Bret Hart thing, like that. I forget what that documentary is called, but
Wrestling with Shadows.
Wrestling with Shadows. There's a lot of eye-opening information in that one.
Yes. And you see Sunny in her prime, running around chasing Beans or Blade or one of them.
Well, you know, my favorite part of that documentary is when Bret Hart's wife looks at Triple H and she's like, "Are you telling me you had no idea what's going on?" And that dude will not look at her because he's a fucking liar.
Yeah, no. What bothers me about that exchange is that she never calls him Paul. She calls him Hunter. She's like, Hunter, were you in on it, Hunter? And it's like, his name's Paul. You know, this is real life here. It reminds me of when Matt Hardy was doing his documentary. He was talking about how like he was so pissed. He was waiting for Edge and he was gonna cut a promo on Edge. You know, and it's like he uses wrestling terms to like express himself. You know, it's like, come on, bro. You were gonna go talk smack to him. Don't say you're gonna cut a promo on him. This is real life.
So the other ones that are good. What's the one that went to the theater that Vince and he makes whatchamacall puke in the can, and then they talk about the Foley and Rock thing.
That's yeah. I forget the name of that one, but that one's another
Beyond the Mat or
Beyond the Mat. He's gonna puke, and then he throws up. That one has them. It has Terry Funk, and it has Jake the Snake.
Yeah.
So they're following different people in the business. And Mick Foley. Oh, it has Mick Foley. Mick Foley's with the WWE. That's where they have Rock hitting them with all those chair shots. And they're showing his kids. They're all crying and stuff. Very hard to watch nowadays. And of course, it has Terry Funk when they show him the X-ray of his knees, and he has no knees. Like
that's like the X-ray of my knees right now.
Damn, man, you gotta. Do you feel like you have a full knee replacement in your future?
The doctor has already told me that it's coming.
Damn.
In both.
Wow. I feel like you're too young for that, but
that's why I'm not getting it yet, because he's like, you're too young. You still have so many things you want to do. So I actually get gel injections every 6 months.
Okay.
Into because of that arthritis. They're just that little cushiony part of your knee. It's pretty much gone.
Yeah, damn. I could imagine. I can't even imagine the kind of pain you're in on a bad day.
Yeah. It's you just have to sort of deal. You're constantly dealing with some sort of like, troublesome thing. You get numb to it, but it's not fun.
Yeah.
All right. David Salvador says, is it true that Dusty Rhodes was the original pick for Vince to be his champion in 1984?
I don't know if it's original pick. I mean, I know I think the original, whatever that means, it was Jimmy Snuka, but he wasn't going to trust Jimmy because he already had Jimmy. And Jimmy was over.
80, I think there are things that happened in 83 that deterred him from making Jimmy. Because I'm reading that Observer yearbook, and there are 2 notes in that year. Nancy Argentina is crying or screaming from a hotel room. Police come, and Jimmy's high as a kite fighting off like multiple police officers. And then not that long after is her death. So those things, Vince had to have been like, okay,
Jimmy wasn't going to work out, and he wasn't relatable. He was a gimmick, and then Plan B was Kerry, right? Kerry Von Erich, that everybody knows about Kerry, and Kerry wasn't going to leave his dad. So it was Jimmy, Kerry, and Hulk. Those are the only 3 that Dusty wasn't, he wasn't the kind of guy that Vince would book around, and he was.
We also just talked about the physique thing, I couldn't see Vince seeing Dusty as like, that's the dude that I want to be, or that's the dude that I want to hang out with, which was part of who he was going to choose to be his top guy.
Yeah, one of the things that if I had a conversation with Vince, first of all, I would ask him about Randy and Steph. But second of all, I would be like, how did you choose your all-star team? Like I know you had a list of all these guys, and I would like to know who were some of his dream guys that he never got, because we'll never know that.
Well, we do know that he ran the matches on the USA Network, and he was telling the promoters that he was putting them on TV for marketing purposes for their promotions, so that to help. I'm guessing to help the overall wrestling business or whatever. I don't know if they fell for that, but he was using them for like marketing surveys to see who the fans were into, so he
in
could
particular the
go
Von
after them.
Erichs. The Von Erichs is the ones that always come out of that story. Yeah, he always had his eye on the Von Erichs, Kerry specifically. But no, I've always heard it was Kerry, Jimmy, or Hulk Hogan, and he went with the right call. He went with Hogan.
Yeah, absolutely the right call. Oh my gosh, what a home run of a pick.
Right.
All right, I think those are all of the questions. Is there anything else you wanted to hit on, Royal Rumble or AEW, before we get out of here?
That's it, man. I'm going through the questions. I think we got them all. Yeah, we got them all. Or the ones that you would want to answer on this.
Yeah,
which is fine.
There's a couple that I avoided.
Yeah,
that are better suited for the KLB Facebook group.
So no, I'm glad we're back, and I had a great time tonight. We're gonna come back. We're gonna try to go on a more consistent schedule as far as like dates. Not so much more episodes, but just maybe like we'll stick to the middle of the month or late in the month.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. We'll figure out what the right rhythm is. Last question: are you going to Vegas?
I'm still thinking about it. You know what? I'm gonna go to. I guess I keep on thinking, am I going to WrestleMania? That's still up in the air. I'm pretty sure I'm going to Vegas.
Yeah,
It's
there's still fun stuff. It seems kind of like a way. I know people always ask me like, why do you go to the show and then not go to WrestleMania? I say, well, I've been to WrestleMania before. I know the experience. You have a good time. Sometimes they're not the greatest WrestleManias, but nowadays it's going to be rare if WrestleMania or any WWE show these days is going to be bad. So you're going to have a great time. The problem now is just the cost. Like if I can get a credential, I will go to probably Saturday. But if not, then I'll just go hang out with people who are going to watch it on, Peacock or whatever. And then you can still have a good time. You just won't be there in the, in the big stadium.
No, I agree with you. And the cost is pretty steep, and it's not about like, I have the income to do it. It's just like, I can't justify it. Like,
Yeah.
I don't feel that I'm getting $700 a day's worth of entertainment. I just don't. If I did, I would. Like, it's not about the money. If I did, I would, but I don't. And so I feel gypped off, and I don't like to feel gypped off, so I'm not going.
Yeah.
If I can't get a ticket, I've budgeted myself. If I could get both days for $600, I'm going. Like,
Okay.
and that's gonna be. We gotta do the whole StubHub gimmick where we're there day of, and hoping that these scalpers are trying
prices
to just
drop.
Yeah. But other than that, I'm not paying these prices, man. It's too much, know. And I've already experienced, like I've said it before, like anything that I could experience as a fan, going on 30 years, I've already experienced it,
Yeah.
I went to the WrestleMania in LA, which ended up being probably one of the best night ones in the history of WrestleManias. Like, I don't see how that's I'm gonna top that.
Mm-hmm.
So like you said, and this is the first year I fall into this category. Like you said, it's like I could just go there, meet some of the friends from online, and just go to the convention, do that whole thing, go to the buffet. Vegas has great buffets, and then just come back. It's 3.5 hours away from me. There's no reason why I shouldn't be in Vegas, but I don't know if I'm gonna go to WrestleMania.
Yeah, I'm with you. All right, yeah, and you know that there's going to be opportunity for me to record. So if there's not that you're going to be on vacation, so not that you would want to do a podcast, but if you were interested in discussing WrestleMania on a show, I might be doing some stuff like that. So
okay, well then we'll see.
All right, so for Draven, I am Double G. We're back with Observe This, talking 1984. We'll be back in a month or so, and like I mentioned, we'll talk David Von Erich's passing, and then sort of the next transition of where Vince McMahon is going with his expansion for WWF. All right, we'll see you when we see you. Peace out.
Bye.